Got it.
Let me know when to start down.
Yeah, just give a second for all the attendees to join in. We can start in like a minute.
Sounds good.
I like the counter. It's growing like crazy. Yeah.
After so you've posted, so it's bound to go to.
I'm super happy about this. Yeah. Product managers always like improving metrics. Yeah.
So your humor has to kind of sort of shine through today.
I'll try my best. नहीं हुआ तो ज़्यादा कुछ नहीं तो उर्दू शायरी सुना दूंगा कोई बड़ी बात नहीं है
I think वो ज़्यादा बड़ी success हो जाएगी हमारी product management conference से पहले. Anyways, I think we've started. So
yes.
Let me get started. So hi everyone. Happy Independence Day to both Pakistan and India. Hope everyone is doing good. My name is Abdul Ghaffar. I'm a product manager at AimFit and a co-founding member at Product Soch. I'm going to be one of your hosts and moderators for this afternoon, and I'd like to welcome you all to the first edition of Product Next Door, the first of its kind IndoPak Product Conference, where we have founders and product leaders from leading startups from both India and Pakistan. The conference has been organized and sponsored by Product Soch and Product Tree. Product Soch is an up-and-coming product community in Pakistan, connecting, empowering, and educating product thinkers and enthusiasts across the country. Product Tree is an Indian community of product leaders, product enthusiasts who try to democratize product management in India and help startups to scale and find the right talent for growth. The conference is structured into 4 panel discussions with 30 minutes each, with a 15-minute break after the first 2 sessions. The first session, a first panel discussion, will begin at 3 p.m. Pakistan time and 3:30 Indian Standard Time. Our session will be the first session will be the cost of disruption, challenges and opportunities of building disruptive products in South Asia, where we discuss the promise of a successful startup economy in the Indo-Pak region and what challenges and opportunities lay ahead. The second session will be about disrupting finance with compassionate fintech products, where we ask our panel on how building user-centric products has enabled the rapid rise of technology firms around the world. We will have a 15-minute break after that and strictly resume at 4:15 p.m. For our third session, where the discussion will be about the education problem in South Asia and how founders and product leaders from the Edtech sector are reimagining the future of education in this region. After that, for our fourth and last session, the topic is breaking into product management. We talk to product leaders and mentors from both sides of the border, where we demystify product management, how to break into this role, and what they look for in new hires. I will also now hand it over to my fellow host and also a speaker in one of the panel conferences, Shravan Tikku. Shravan is a product leader, mentor, and as he likes to be called Bhai to thousands around the world. He's also very popular and funny on social media as well. And I'm sure we owe a huge chunk of the audience attendance to him. He has a huge fan base in Pakistan and India, and I'm sure around the world. Shravan is a principal product manager at Byju's, India's leading edtech platform. He's also an educator and runs his YouTube channel by the name of Swagwala PM, and a co-founder of Product Tree, which is one of the sponsors of this event, and also one of India's largest product communities. Over to you, Shravan.
Thank you very much, Abdul. Itna acha intro, I never expected whether I deserve such an intro or not. But first and foremost, one of the things that I had always in my heart, and I think I really, really applaud Atir Bhai for that. This was always this thought that how do we democratize building great products across the same plethora of Southeast Asia, because hum sab ki economy similar hai, we are growing, we have the same kind of needs, and we are similar kind of people, right? तो ये कहीं ना कहीं एक बहुत ही छोटी सी एक मन में एक ड्रीम थी, जिसको कहीं ना कहीं आतिर भाई और प्रोडक्ट सोच ने बहुत ही अच्छी तरीके से एग्जीक्यूट किया है. आई वाज एबल टू प्ले अ वेरी स्मॉल पार्ट ऑफ इट एंड आई एम सुपर ग्लैड टू डू दैट वे. एंड उससे भी ज्यादा मैं अपने जितने भी स्पीकर्स हैं उन सबका इस्तकबाल करता हूं कि ये कहता हूं कि यू हैव टेकन आउट योर कीमती टाइम एंड कम हियर टू गिव द इम्पार्ट योर विजडम ऑफ times and times of experience and the kind of entrepreneurial stints that you've done. तो उसके लिए मैं बहुत ज्यादा खुश हूं. एंड प्राइमरीली मैं ये चाहता हूं कि दिस कॉन्फ्रेंस should not necessarily be just a product dialogue, but it should be kind of a muhim which eventually becomes something like मेरे को कभी ऐसा ना लगे कि I cannot reach out to my fellow brothers across the nation and figure out how to solve problems and how do you build great stuff for each other. So once again, thank you very much for coming in. It means a lot and definitely ये एक बहुत ही बड़ी कोशिश है जिसका मैं चाहूंगा कि आगे ही ये और बड़ी होती जाए, and there is a time when we see around thousand people in the conference. Thank you very much, speakers. Over to you. Yeah.
So we have, Shravan, I think we have like 8 minutes till our first session. And we were kind of hoping कि आप अपने जो आपके humor और आपके जो startup humor जो जिसके हम subject होते हैं, by the way. So one of the funnier things is that when you kind of write jokes on product management, we have a Slack channel which is on general, and you have people taking screenshots of those of the memes that you write and tag us product managers, and you're like, ये देखो ये बात कर रहे हैं, तो that's we are often the subject of a humor that you sent on LinkedIn. So I'd like आप उस बारे में थोड़ा सा just talking about how you started your journey as an influencer and also as a writer, and somehow how you are building both product tree and Flagwala PM, and how you're educating people on product, because even though India is much further ahead in the startup sort of journey, there are still there are very products management still looks like sort of a mystified role of sorts.
Yeah. So yeah, Abdul, the core thought was that eventually the way I have scaled in my life, I always thought that success might be something very materialistic. Initially वैसा लगा क्योंकि when you grow up, you don't know how success is planned out. तो जब मैं शुरू करके जितना भी life में I was very fortunate to meet great people who have helped me become whatever amount of leader I am. So when I reached to a certain place and I realized I'm earning enough money and it's not really making me happy. Right? कि कुछ बहुत ज्यादा तो फर्क नहीं पड़ा मेरे लाइफस्टाइल में. There nothing really changed. So what happened at that point of time? I went back to something which I fundamentally believed in. Like our religious book is called the Bhagavad Gita, and I think majority of the scriptures talk about the same thing. And where I figured out that compassion is at the core of basically doing virtues in life, right? And वो जो concept था वही मैं सामने लाना चाहता था. तो और कहीं ना कहीं एक तरीका ये था कि जिसका मुझे लगता था कि शायद मैं इसमें थोड़ा सा बेटर हो गया हूँ प्रोडक्ट मैनेजमेंट में, तो शायद लिख पाऊंगा इस बारे में. तो जब मैंने लिखना शुरू किया तो मुझे कहीं ना कहीं ये समझ में आया कि people talk about it in a very mystified way, and it seems like a very elite role of some kind of people might get in with a certain background. But what is fundamentally it is just problem solving skills, how you think about people and you solve the problems at scale, right? तो एक बहुत ही अच्छा जरिया मुझे लगा कि लोग हंसना तो चाहते हैं, तो अगर उनको हंसाया जाए तो कैसी बात. और मैं कहीं ना कहीं एक प्रोडक्ट मैनेजर हूं, तो उसको मैंने रिटेंशन के पॉइंट ऑफ व्यू से सोच लिया कि यार कि अगर मैं हंसा पाऊंगा लोगों को तो शायद मैं उनको रिटेन कर पाऊंगा. तो जब मैं हंसाता रहा, और ये सारे इंसिडेंट्स होते रहते हैं कि एक क्यूए एक डेवलपर से बात कर रहा है और वो आपस में लड़ रहे हैं, फिर एक फ्राइडे को हम कुछ रिलीज कर रहे हैं, कुछ फट जाता है. तो ये सारी चीजें जो है, जो बहुत ही फनी इंसिडेंट्स हैं, इनको मैं सामने लाने लगा ताकि लोगों को एग्जीक्यूशन के बारे में भी पता चले, और साइमल्टेनियसली उसके पीछे एक स्टोरी भी दिया करता था कि कहीं ना कहीं आप फर्स्ट प्रिंसिपली नहीं सोचोगे तो आपके साथ ऐसा हो जाएगा. तो वो गलतियां ना कीजिए जो मैंने की, और वापस जाइए और अपने आप को एक अच्छा थिंकर बनाइए. तो उसी चीज को करते करते मुझे इतना प्यार मिलेगा कि इन सारे लोग, मतलब इतने सारे मेरे स्टूडेंट्स हैं जो मुझसे आज बात करते हैं, और मैं खुद इतना अच्छा इंसान बन गया हूं कि जैसे कहीं ना कहीं मैं आतिर भाई से मिला, आप सबसे मिला, and see something out of this network effect is happening which is so amazing in itself, right? And that is what happened, and it built that amount of love in everybody's hearts through my humor. If I make them smile, eventually the goal was to live 1,000 years, so probably that's how I'm trying to put it across कि यार मैं लोगों के दिलों में जिंदा रहूंगा. तो कहीं ना कहीं thank you very much for that. But overall, like, it is always with people like you, people matlab, who I admire, who have done very well in life. I just want to be connected to them always, because that's how you create kind of space in people's hearts. Yeah, that's it. तो मैं थोड़ा इसको सेंटी साइड पे ले गया, लेकिन what I was trying to present was कि let's keep laughing and building great stuff. Yeah, so that was the agenda, primarily doing it. Yeah.
One confusing, one sort of conflicting thought जो जब से जो भी आपसे मिला है और जो आपको जानते हैं, हम कल आतिर से भी ये बात कर रहे थे कि like how does Shravan sleep, because like leading like product at Byju's in itself seems like a very taxing task, right? And then like product tree, and then also being able to start product tree ke Swagwala PM, and then just maintaining all of your social media content, it just seems like superhuman kind of sort of task to do. And also I wanted to also like give you the platform to talk about how you're helping 100 PMs get their first job in 100 days. So
Yeah. So एक्चुअली ये कहीं ना कहीं मैं इसको जिस तरह समझता हूँ कि when you're really passionate about something, right, and I'm duly passionate about it, it doesn't let me sleep, right? It kind of becomes a very secondary part which my parents obviously are not happy about कि यार कि ये तो पूरा दिन काम ही करता रहता है. And people ask me this question कि how do you work so much, how do you specifically do all of those things together? And the thing is, ये काम नहीं है, ये मुझे पसंद है. Like this is what I like, right? तो मेरे को कभी उसमें वो थकान फील ही नहीं होती कि लोगों की मदद करना और कहीं ना कहीं खुद सीखना, उसमें मेरा खुद का सेल्फिश मोटिव है कि मैं उनसे सीख पाता हूँ बहुत कुछ. तो वो करना और इवेंचुअली गोल वही है कि एक अच्छा थिंकर बनना है. तो कहीं ना कहीं उस तरफ की कि एक एफर्ट है जो मुझे कभी भी थकने नहीं देता. इट काइंड ऑफ कीप्स मी मोटिवेटेड, वेरी ड्रिवन टुवर्ड्स इट. क्योंकि कहीं ना कहीं अगर मैं आज से 20 साल बाद ये कर पाया कि यार I could build a community of 10,000 people who gotten into a great career because of me. I don't think there's a bigger gratification than that in any way, right? ना पैसा ना कोई और चीज इस चीज को हासिल करवा सकती है. तो वो एक चीज है जो कहीं ना कहीं ड्राइव करती है. और या बाकी तो मैं आप और I think in this event one of the things that I really noticed was that you've been very structured. I would have at least not been able to do this way, right? So I'm super glad that you built this amazing host of speakers who will be sharing their insights, and most of all I'll be learning so much from them, right? तो कहीं ना कहीं बहुत खुश हूँ इस चीज के लिए.
Yeah. Anyway, so that's it for the intro section, guys. We will have our first session starting in 2 minutes. So I'm just going to let the audience join in. And then we can kickstart the first session in exactly 2 minutes. And in the meantime, if you guys have any questions, so we have the audience writing 100 PM in 100 days. ये बहुत popular हो गया श्रवण, आपके जो 100 PM in 100 days जो आपने नौकरी दिलवाई है काफी लोगों को.
चलिए अब let's move towards the session. I think people are waiting for the speakers to give the insights.
Can we please check our audio once before we move to the live session with the audience? Can you hear me well?
Yeah. Yep, sorry. You're audible.
Perfect, thank you. Yeah.
All right. So let's start with our first session. Okay, great. I'll just let Maha put all the speakers on the spotlight. Is it done? Okay, great. All right. So for our first session, the session is the cost of disruption, challenges and opportunities of building disruptive products in South Asia. I'll first start by introducing our guest, and I'd like our guest to sort of, do a wave at the camera when I introduce him, so that this audience can sort of, identify that it's who's speaking. For our first guest, I'll start with Venkat RM. Venkat is a seasoned product leader who has led product teams and built products at Bounce, Razorpay, Ola Caps, and Naukri.com. Very recently, he was a VP of products at Bounce, leading consumer products revenue and growth. He writes about product leadership on LinkedIn. Next up, we have Noor Shaukat, who is the co-founder of AimFit and leads the product engineering team. AimFit is Pakistan's leading health and wellness platform with a mission to transform the lives of 110 million women in Pakistan. After that, we have Yasser, co-founder of SalesFlow and Jugnu. SalesFlow is Pakistan's largest sales and distribution platform, managing revenue in excess of $2 billion to $2 billion US, and Jugnu, which is a B2B e-commerce platform empowering thousands of small retailers. After that, we have Sair Ali, founder of Bling.co, previously Eid Mubarak. Sair has more than 3 years of founder experience in restaurant management and food delivery space with Bling.co. Bling.co is a B2B SaaS startup enabling brick and mortar restaurants to build their digital presence. Lastly, we have Swarap Nanda, a creator economy entrepreneur and co-founder at Pencil. Pencil is the world's first free publishing platform that allows writers to write, publish, and distribute their work worldwide in ebook and paperback formats to thousands of retailers. Now, the backdrop of this discussion is that you have profiles of two different startup economies. One is obviously India, who's been an investor's dream and produced 16 unicorns this year only, and raised a record-staggering $10.46 billion in the first 6 months of 2021, compared to Pakistan, which has been for long touted to be the next big thing in the startup world, But only over the course of the past 18 months has its technology ecosystem finally come to life in an unprecedented fashion, with the ecosystem being on track to raise more money than the previous 5 years combined. And even more exciting is the fashion in which it's raised it, right? With famed international investors like the likes of YC and Kleiner Perkins also securing investments here. With YC and Kleiner Perkins being very instrumental in early startup partnerships in India back and sort of helping India become the startup giant it is. While the two ecosystems are in starkly different stages, the common socioeconomic and political factors make India's startup journey an important case study for Pakistanis entrepreneurs to learn from. So with that, I'd like to start with you, Yasir. Pakistan's adaptation to the internet economy has been slow until recently. What's changed to finally get us on the right track, right? And unsurprisingly, all the founders of all three sort of startups, AimFit, Blink.co, and Jugnu were founded in the last 2 to 3 years. So what has changed? And what are some of the biggest challenges do you see in front of you to consolidate on the immense opportunity that we have in front of you?
Thank you, Abdul, for the wonderful introduction, and thank you, the entire product coach and the entire product tree team for having us. It's really a pleasure to be able to have people from both sides of the border join in to share their insights. Well, just answering your question, so first of all, to begin with, India as well as Pakistan happen to have quite a significant numeric numbers when it comes to the population. So about 220 million people is a sizable chunk of people for Pakistan, and similarly 1.2 1.3 billion people in India make the entire case for why the investment and why the transformation is to happen over here. Now, when it comes to the journey in Pakistan, we all know that the 3G and 4G implementation actually started in 2014 for Pakistan. And when we talk about really having the numeric availability of people who are connected, making business models viable, that took some time, of course, and there was quite a delayed start. My first startup, Sales Flow, we launched in 2015, and we had an advantage that 3G had just come in, and cloud services were able to allow a lot of enterprises to quickly switch to our platform, which led to the creation of Pakistan's largest sales and distribution platform. Just coincided on the timing. Now, when we really fast forward, 2047, a couple of 2.5 decades from now, Pakistan, in terms of population terms, would be the world's third largest country in terms of, it would have crossed the US and Indonesia in terms of the population terms. So it will be India, followed by China, followed by Pakistan. So this current 100 million subscribers that we have in terms of 3G and 4G internet would have, of course, grown significantly. Now, coming specifically to the point, this delayed start that we had on 3G, 4G did not enable enough of the people to participate in the network effect. So if there was a B2B marketplace to be created, your small businesses had to have that connectivity, that they had to have that penetration that took time to come in. Similarly, if there were any, let's say, Uberized delivery to happen, you would have had to have enough demand and supply to really come in. So in the last three years, we've seen that the numbers have really exponentially multiplied, and we have 100 million plus internet users who are connected all the time that have enabled this economy to really take off. So what we see is that a lot of this will now accelerate further into a lot more business models, disrupting the current ways of working to accelerate the journey.
Yeah. Thank you for those insights. And I'll also like your thoughts on this. In the context of Fit, right? Operating in the fitness and wellness industry, fitness is still seen to be a novelty in Pakistani market and an elite privilege. How is AimFit changing that perception?
So, Assalamualaikum, Abdul, and everybody on the call. Hi to everybody across the border. Thank you for having us. This is a wonderful opportunity for us to connect and learn from each other's experiences. So I just want to touch a little bit on what Yasir had mentioned. And I think it's been, so AimFit has actually been around for the last 7 years. It's just we've existed as a brick and mortar fitness business. And one question that gets asked to us, and one that we also ask ourselves repeatedly, is when was the right time for us to have raised our seed money to launch the digital version of our platform. Now that we're in the thick of it, I think we in hindsight, we definitely should not have raised sooner, because as Yasser was mentioning, even 4 or 5 years ago, there's actually multiple startups that you hear of. They had the same idea. Founders had put obviously a lot of effort behind different products that they were building, but we're really seeing that in the last couple of years, these products are now taking off. And I think it's a mix of everything. To go back to the cliche of the ecosystem wasn't there, but the ecosystem, I think the top 3 factors that would make up the ecosystem is, one would, I think, be this injection of capital, whether it's local or foreign, which we're now seeing, especially expedited post-COVID. Second is, I think, even talent. So people who've seen these companies grow and scale, whether it's in MENA or it's in the US and the UK, returning to Pakistan to build these companies and infusing that confidence in the local population that we can also build giants that can match what has already been done in the West. And I think third definitely is the proliferation of digital technology, especially mobile phones, internet speeds. And I think one that is going to have another massive impact on the ecosystem is digital payments, which we're still, kind of in the middle of figuring out a solution for in Pakistan. From specifically speaking from an AimFit perspective, definitely fitness in Pakistan, especially for women, which is what we focus on, is considered a niche market. Boutique fitness or being able to partake in these kind of instructor-led wellness classes is considered an activity for the rich and privileged. And 100% like with everything, digitization will democratize this product as well. The other added kind of lens that AimFit provides us is that because we target females only, we also look to understand what are the challenges that women face in adopting digital products on the whole, not just a fitness digital product. And definitely the challenges are different. But one thing that is clear is that it's not because there's no will from the side of the consumer. I think everybody who is under 40 is comfortable using, that's a conservative number. Everybody who's under 40 who has access to a mobile phone is comfortable using a mobile phone if they have, I would say, even, like a reasonable level of education, which of course is also something that is currently in Pakistan is being worked on. The will is there. The resources are now becoming more and more available. So we're only looking for this trend to grow from here.
Thank you so much. I think that makes a lot of sense. And certainly puts things into perspective. I'd also now like to move to Saurabh and Venkat. And obviously India is at a very different mature stage in their startup journey, as mentioned before. And so I'd like to hear from you guys as to what are some of the key reasons that made Indian ecosystem such an investor's dream over the past years. What are some of the new challenges do you guys foresee for the startups in the Indian ecosystem, especially in terms of hitting scale globally and competing with the North American and European markets? I'll start with you, Venkat, and then I'll head to.
Okay. On competing with the international players, we already have started that. Okay? If you take the SaaS space, we've already made inroads. There's tremendous response. If you ask me how did it start, right? If I go back to year 2000, Y2K crisis gave birth to, boosted the software services. So people across the world trusted that, Indians can do software, right? Fast forward around 2012-13, a similar revolution happened when SMEs across the world wanted quality products at an affordable price under superb support. Right? That's where the Zohos and the Freshworks came in. And now, SaaS has become a norm, and a lot of people just start with US first or Europe first. Right?
Yeah.
The challenge in terms of challenges, if you see, I'd broadly classify them into two areas. One is the technology gap itself. Like some new technology emerging, it largely comes from the West and it takes some time. But that gap, if you see in certain fronts like AI, the latest ones are there in India, and we are able to build solutions around it. The second is the market gap, right? Like companies in Valley have the advantage because the market is there right in front of them to test some new concepts, ideas. I think that will slowly change. Even now, VCs are not quite funding. You know, when an Indian startup says, "I'm going to build a B2C product for the Europe," right? Like it's not. But I feel it will start with certain segments, right, where a smaller segment will be picked up by Indian companies. People will show that, hey, we can understand customers across the world. We understand the latest needs, and then it will become very common, like a Canadian company or a European or a US company building for the world. But it's going to take some time on the B2C front.
And how do you like shorten that process? So for example, obviously, like as in it's easier said than done to kind of say accelerate, but given that you in the past, like, you know, this was a record year even in terms of fundraising, and in kind of an inflection point, right? There was an inflection point in 2013, 2014, where you had, you know, just 300 deals for startups being done, where you had around $1 billion raised, and then around $3 to $4 billion raised. And exactly next year, that shoots up to be around $8 to $9 billion and 900 to 1,000 like, you know, deals a year. And I'm trying to understand that, you know, we kind of see these inflection points. We see similarly for Pakistan, this year has been quite phenomenal to be able to sort of, you know, really consolidate on that promise. And then, so what are some of those next trends that you foresee, and how can you accelerate your pace to that?
Okay. If you see, right, like a lot of these changes happened because there was some big event, right, like that happened and kind of fast forward. My sense is tech talent across the world, it's very hard to compete. Like companies are, the wage inflation is so high. My sense is that first, some companies will start building products, consumer products from India, and that will be like showcase to investors to say that, okay, this is going to work, and then we will have a global products, B2C global products from India. We are already seeing it in 2021, where even Indian startups are competing hard for the talent. But I guess the situation in value would be like 10x, right? Like the problems would be 10x. Maybe 2021-22 would be an inflection point when remote work becomes a norm and people are very comfortable, you know, about working with anyone, trusting people across the geographies. Maybe this is the year.
Yeah. Thank you. Saurabh, and I'd like to sort of, you know, give you the floor to kind of give your feedback on this sort of point.
Thanks, Venkat. Very valuable points, and thanks, Abdul. So how I'd like to answer it is in a single point, that what has changed is mindset. And I'll kind of run you through a personal plus India's journey in the last 21 years, and I take it from year 2000. So in the year 2000, I used to work at a company called Bajaj Auto. It is the world's second largest, two-wheeler manufacturing company. And that point in time, while passing engineering, even dreaming to have, initially I wanted to be an automobile design engineer. And, what surprised me while I was interning there was all the two-wheelers that were, kind of manufactured by India. India had the world's largest two-wheeler manufacturing, 1 and 2, both spots were in India. But the design was done by a single company called TRD, or Tokyo R&D, right? We didn't have the design capability there, right? And the year 2000 signified a lot of changes, right? India produced its first car, which was designed partially, in India. And that point in time, when I was speaking to my other people around me in the company, imagining that you could design it in India was hard. Can you beat that? Imagining, you're not even like, to take that shot was difficult. When I wanted to start an automobile company initially, imagining was difficult, right? In by 2007, I'll cover 7 years from there. What India was producing was essentially clone startups. Clone startups are something that exist in wherever in US, in Europe. You just create clones, right? And you saw a lot of unicorns coming out of clone startups. And by 7 years further, 2014-15, entrepreneurs got comfortable solving a real fresh problem. And that now, if you see, you mentioning about $10 billion raised in the first 6 months in India, there are a bunch of clone startups there again, but there are a lot of startups that are solving fresh problems, and these problems are global problems. So we've seen what, say, Byju's has done at Shravan's startup, and also look at Browser Stack, look at Postman. Each of them have actually solved something fresh, and it didn't matter whether the product is only for India or globally. Right. So in terms of one single change that has happened, that is mindset. And I'll close the story with one more thing. Today, you have someone like Ola coming in, and it just says that, I don't care whether and how, whatever size you are of, say a Hero Honda or a Bajaj or whatever that you are, and anything else. I will start a company in 6 months' time. I'll have production going. I'll have 100,000, scooters out, and I'll touch 1 million and become the world's largest two-wheeler manufacturing company in 2 years' time. Now, journey for I just used an industry which is not software, knowingly to kind of give you perspective on entrepreneurship. Software is just one format of it. Right, but what has changed? So for Bhavish to just imagine that the world's largest, electric two-wheeler can come in, and everything is rolling as per schedule. We pretty much are not even questioning whether that can happen. It's just happening. Everybody knows it will happen. I think yes. One single point: mindset.
Yeah, I certainly agree. I think that belief is now kind of quite instilled that we can have our own sort of, similar to Silicon Valley heroes within your own country. And that's kind of led to that adaptability.
And to just add to that, say, one more thing on mindset and how startups are forming. In 2019, I had gone to Beijing to ByteDance. And I was awed by what they were doing. Right? It's a company sitting out of Beijing and some part of China. And they've created a product that is running so well in India, in US, everywhere. Right? Who would have thought of that earlier? And that begins with mindset that my product is going to have global users, global scale. Everything will be global from day one. And at that point in time, the number of users that say TikTok had in India was significantly higher than what they had in China. And this is not a demographic dividend.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Thank you so much for that. Saira, I'd like to come to you next and understand that, how are startups in Pakistan, and generally, like, for example, for you as a SaaS startup founder, how are you dealing with recruiting top talent, right? Because I think we've touched that in different aspects. Venkat talked about it, Noor talked about it. Especially when it comes to hiring engineers with experience in building products or roles like product design and product management, which are still in very much their nascent stages in this country. Does local talent suffice, or are you trying, or do you sort of look for sourcing it from the outside?
So unfortunately, like we are relying on, not unfortunately, but like we are relying on the local talent. And the problem here is that with COVID, access to talent has gone beyond borders, and there are remote people hiring from Pakistan now, and we have to compete with US startups who are hiring, attracting similar top talent from Pakistan. So I think that's a bigger challenge for us. There is no need for us to go and hire outside of Pakistan. I think there is enough talent available. But yes, I agree partially that the kind of product talent, design talent that is generally available outside, who have like a product manager who has worked at 3-4 venture funded companies, they're not available as of yet, right? But yes, in 5 to 7 years, 10 years, that will be available to us. I think that the challenge here is the economics. And I was reading about India as well, that the engineers have become the highest priced commodity right now, again for the same reason. So I think we should sit together and come up with a strategy. How can we retain our talent in our own countries?
I heard that Razorpay sort of is one of those companies that pays insanely, and paying up to $150,000 yearly in tech talent. And if you can't compete with that, then the talent just goes, even for India, just goes abroad. And that's a brain drain, is a significant problem for for us right now, and then also India, which are again much more mature. But Sai, you mentioned that we don't have those product managers and product designers and those significant roles and instrumental in sort of taking startups from this ideation to scale. And you said that it'll take 5 to 7 years for us to get those experienced individuals. But what about now? How about going from this right now to those 5 to 7 years, right? Because we don't have that. And we want to be able to somehow create some form of structure where these people can come in and we can somehow expedite that 5 to 7 years of learning into much lesser. Because if the funding and the investment is to increase, if more and more attention is to come, then the talent is just to be able, it's going to create a dearth of such talent.
Yes, I think there's like several aspects how that journey will be done. So on one level, let's say for the likes of Bikeas, which has raised their Series B, or one of our largest ride-hailing networks, venture-funded startups, they have the ability or the financial muscle to attract a very senior chief product officer as part of their reverse brain drain program, and they could have someone back from US to Pakistan who has worked on perhaps unicorn projects, right? So that's for the larger one. For the smaller ones, like ourselves, seed stage, Series A, I think, so obviously natural talent is there. Product at the end of the day is an extension of other business functions. From my non-product managers' understanding of that is. So I think a lot of people we take help from. So Arthur is one person we very often reach out to him, take help from him, and he has built that, done that. Obviously, we cannot afford him, right? But there's plenty of learning that is available. So that's the kind of journey we all are doing together. Startups like SadaPay, startups like Bazaar in Pakistan, like these are the startups which are creating and nurturing and they have a strong focus on products. And Kareem did that job a few years ago. So there are at least some product managers available with SadaPay and Bazaar and Blink. Like our CTO is our chief product officer as well. So the kind of focus we have we will be creating a layer of product managers, which in 2 to 3 years time will start appearing and will be available to several other startups.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So we have one question from the panel. So I'd like to field it to everyone because rather than me just taking over all the time and asking questions. So the question is that when thinking of launching a startup, which route is better for initial required financing? Own investment or external pre-seed investment? And I'd just open it up so to whoever kind of this was specifically asked for Yasser, but I'd take 1 point from Yasser, and then I'd also like to hear from Swarab or Venkat. And then I think we only have 5 minutes remaining. So yeah, Yasser.
Yes, I think first of all, before you even start launching a startup, think about the problem, build empathy around the problem, and be very clear in terms of how you're going to solve it. Usually, it does not take any money to get out your first minimum viable product. It's just you in your garage or you at your home trying to solve it. Until you're not really clear in terms of how you go about it, be clear what you need the money for. So in some cases, if you're going to be getting a huge network effect, then you might need a lot of money, but those are again in the same clone startups as Swarab mentioned. But in most cases, if you're solving a problem, be very, very attached to it. And I can tell you'll get your first couple of tick marks without raising the money, and then go to VC or whoever to get that money to validate and kind of scale that solution. And if you're really true at solving the problem, you will actually have a lot more emotional attachment to solving the problem than to raising the money. Money mostly comes second, after you've started to solve the problem.
Yeah, and I think, Noor, this is also what you mentioned, right? That it's a very interesting it's been a very interesting sort of journey for AIMFIT as well, as starting out as brick and mortar, and then like finding out when the right time was. And then when the right time came, was it kind of very easy to be able to attract investors, or was it where they thought that, oh, okay, this business has existed for quite several years, and why now? So yeah.
Yeah. I think I just second what Yasser had said. I think the problem discovery is the biggest factor. Like for our journey, we started off as a traditional book publishing company, and when we wanted to go venture, we had kind of chanced upon a problem that has not been resolved in the global book publishing space or even content space. So we were able to raise like $1.5 million just on concept. We didn't have the product. The product just has come out just 30 odd weeks back, right? So I think the genuinity of the problem discovery is pivotal, like Yasser mentioned.
Yeah, 100% agreed. We've had that. We've had that experience at AIMFIT for years, where we were solving the problem through a brick and mortar business. And not only does it help you clarify how you're going to solve the problem, and like Yasser mentioned, you become, it helps build empathy around the problem. It also gives you a very clear lens on the customer and what their perspective is, which I think is obviously the number one kind of anchor point that you need to stick with throughout the journey of your entrepreneurship journey. And the sooner you get started on that, rather than make VC funding your focus, the better your chances of building a great product and also raising money off the back of it.
Yeah. Thank you so much. That closes it for this round. It's been an absolute pleasure having all of you here. I hope this is the beginning of first of many such conversations. There's so much learning for us to do, and so much, we have to learn from you guys. Thank you so much. And with that, I'll close this first panel discussion. We will have our next session starting in 2 minutes, and the host and the moderator for that will be Anam. So thank you so much, everyone. It was a pleasure having you.
Thank you. Thank you. Such a pleasure. Cheers.
Thanks.
Hello, everyone. I'm Anam. Thank you so much for joining, and thank you so much for handing over Abdul. So we'll start with our next panel. Just a second, I'll wait for the attendees to settle in and for the panelists to join. We'll just start in a minute. Okay. Hello again, everyone. I think we'll start this discussion on fintech. Again, my name is Anam, and I am the product lead at Chuktu and a co-founding member of Product Soch. Really excited to be here and hearing this fintech panel. We have amazing panelists. I'll just go around and introduce each and every one of them. And I'll just request all the panelists to wave at the camera so that audience can connect with you. So we have all the panelists with us. first of all, I'll go ahead and introduce Nagappan Ramasamy. Nagappan is a senior product manager at Razorpay. He has more than 8 years of experience and is a product enthusiast. Thank you so much for joining us today, Nagappan. Next, we have Haseeb Siddiqui. Haseeb is the co-founding member of Dastagir and also the head of product at Dastagir. Dastagir is a B2B commerce marketplace that connects retailers with the wholesalers. Glad to have you on the panel, Haseeb. Moving forward, we have a very great profile from India. I think a lot of people know her, Monica Jasuja. She has over 20 years of experience in building financial innovation digital products. Currently, she is the vice president at Comviva and also leading their Fintech solutions division. Thank you so much, ma'am, for joining us today. Moving forward, we have Monis Rahman from Pakistan. I think he needs no introduction. He is an entrepreneur, venture capitalist, and businessman, is the chairman, CEO, and founder of Naseeb Networks, Dukaan, and Finja. Dukaan is serving 5 million small, medium enterprises in Pakistan, and Finja provides them credit to grow. Thank you so much for taking out the time to join us, sir. Last but not the least, someone who has personally inspired me a lot, Noreen Hayat. She is the co-founder of Teys Financial Services. Teys caters to underbanked and underserved Pakistanis for their short-term financial services. Thank you so much, Noreen. Glad to have you on the panel. So this is our panel for the day, and I'll jump right in to the discussion. So for the fintech, we know that fintech globally is a very growing field, right? And it's very nascent in Pakistan right now, and we have a couple of challenges, but with the new initiatives like fintech associations, it's jumpstarting in Pakistan right now. On India, on the other hand, fintech is the world's fastest growing platform in India. They have a lot of funding. It's valued at $31 billion right now, and it's expected to go to $84 billion by 2025. So I would like to start the discussion by seeing the challenges that Pakistan is facing and maybe moving on to see how India has catered to those challenges and led into the growth phase. So maybe let's start with you, Noreen. Teys targets underbanked and underserved Pakistanis. What are some of the challenges for penetrating into these market segments?
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me. This is an absolutely amazing platform and a lot to learn from you guys across the border. And I'm rightly pointed out, I think we are still at a very nascent stage when it comes to building the ecosystem. We've just started to lay the building blocks for the ecosystem. And yes, there seems to be a lot of activity happening right now, but there are a lot of moving pieces that we need to address. And I think the regulator over here has been very supportive, but that again is just, that's literally scratching the surface right now. With Teys, we've been working on serving the and the underbanked. So we work as a neobank model, and credit nano loans is the first product that we went into the market with. But this is literally the beginning of an entire slate of financial services, which includes savings, insurance, and ultimately investments as well. So I think the challenge is, I think there's a edge challenge state over here. One is the customer side. Definitely a lot needs to be done on onboarding of the customer in terms of literacy, awareness, and of course addressing their needs to begin with. And I think right now there are lots of products in the market, but we need to do a lot of work on having the right product design for these customers, because we've seen with banks at least the product journeys have been antiquated for the longest time. And I think fintechs are really trying to break that with the new age products that are coming into the market. The second, I would say, the incumbents themselves in the market. I think the mindset shift is integral to actually bring about this change, because right now the stage that we are in the ecosystem, fintechs alone or the incumbents alone can't really bring the wave that's needed. Yes, maybe we can bring in some ripples, but we really need waves to come into this market. And for that, we do see some partnerships already happening between the fintech players and the incumbents. And that mindset mindset shift has to happen. And I think third, but the most important is really the ecosystem in terms of the regulators or an enabling environment for this ecosystem to flourish. So whether we talk about data, I think now discussions are happening around open banking in Pakistan, and still very, very nascent. We haven't really gotten there. But that's integral, and we need to really have a proper structure around open banking. Then we need to see how digital onboarding of customers can be done. Then there's another side of merchants, of how can they be onboarded in a more seamless manner. The credit bureau itself. So there are many moving pieces here that we are really right now beginning to look into, but we haven't really gotten there where we see in the Indian ecosystem already evolved. And I think this is the early days of the Indian fintech ecosystem, and you guys probably started many years back. And we happen to be there now. So yeah, lots to be done, lots of challenges, but we're taking these on as opportunities. So let's hope we get there faster.
Rightly said, Noreen. Thank you so much. I think I'll move on to Monica. If you can talk about how India is the fastest growing and how they have overcome some of these challenges and what's there for us to learn from the journey.
Thank you so much first of all, for the opportunity and wonderful forum. I think India in the last 7 to 8 years, I would say probably the decade, has made more progress than anywhere else in the world. At the back of a couple of things that have happened really well in the Indian market. First of all, like the US is very, very market driven. EU is very regulatory driven. India seems to be very government driven. Government is the biggest disruptor in the Indian fintech ecosystem, and I think every fintech will acknowledge the work done by the Indian government over the last, I would say, 10 to 12 years, and this has been acknowledged overall globally as well. But I think in the current decade, what has happened is that somewhere somebody obviously had the foresight and vision to connect basic ecosystems together, and that has right now been materialized or formalized with a JAM Trinity, as we call it. It's called J, stands for Jan Dhan, which is a bank account for all. A stands for Aadhaar, which is our social identification, and M stands for a mobile. Now, imagine this particular ecosystem working together, and I'll give you a small example. Getting your income tax identification number is now taking less than 4 minutes. So basically, you have an income tax ID delivered to your doorstep in the next 3 to 4 days. Now, all of this is happening at the back of these 3 big pieces coming together, and essentially the rail that holds them together isn't one that is necessarily owned by private enterprises. It's owned by the government, which is called a public infrastructure for good. So Noreen has highlighted digital onboarding. She's highlighted the unbanked and the underserved. The question really becomes, even when you provide, first of all, access needs to be provided. Second, access needs to be enabled by enough regulatory drive so that banking and other financial institutions support. And third, which is probably the most important, is fintechs working together with different operators to really solve niche problems. I actually think that what fintech has done in India is a playbook for what can happen if public and private work together. Instead of fighting with each other and behaving as competitors, India is probably one of the markets in which the fintechs and the Indian government, and I would say even the banks, actually work together. And if one of them doesn't operate the way it's expected, each one of them stands up for this particular ecosystem, which is why Indian consumers are winning. And last, I'd like to highlight that there is a Make in India product called UPI. It looks like a Make in India product, but I must admit that because I'm a payment professional myself, obviously one has to go a little bit behind and understand that technology and innovation happened many years ago, like in the UK with faster payments. But India made it possible with a public infrastructure to make it available for people who really do deserve these services and did not want to pay for it. So now the next step in India, just like in Pakistan and in South Asia, is to make sure that our mobile payments population is able to go beyond the top layer, which is literally the top of the pyramid, from 100 million users, and we're trying to go into 500 million users.
Yeah, I think I totally agree with you. You rightly so pointed out that it's a very regulated and structured market, and building in that market is very challenging. So with that, I would want to move on to Nagappan. If you can comment about, with your product manager experience, like building product in such a regulated and structured market, How challenging is that, and how do you ensure to, like, the market that we are serving is not very literate? So how do you build products that can serve that market, and what are some of their challenges?
So I started my product management career in Middle East, actually, Kuwait, after my master's. But when I went there, Indian ecosystem, payment ecosystem was not that great. So UPI, as Monica pointed, UPI was a game changer. Like I went for a year to Middle East, I came back and I saw like everyone was having mobile, and even my like people working like blue collar workers, everyone was able to do payments. So UPI was a game changer. And again, initially banks were not adopting to it. Like banks, UPI came 2 years back, then banks were not doing it. Then what did government do is, like the previous company which I worked in was JustPay. Like they came, they did a partnership with JustPay. Nandan Nilekani himself drove the project. And in 3 weeks, they built a government app called Beam. So government was like, banks, if you don't adopt it, I'll make you adopt it. Like, because it's going to do something good for the customers. So always it was customer centric. So with UPI, what happened was, like, one important thing among the customers, trust was built. Like initially customers were, for example, first when you give cards, right? Like they did not believe that, okay, if someone can steal my card, they can go and pay on my behalf. And next one is, then other than trust, convenience. Like then net banking came into picture, and net banking, you would have to remember your username, password, multiple things. So one side customer experience was built better. Another side, as Naureen pointed out, correct, digital onboarding. So previously what has to happen is you have to open a bank account, or you would have to get a credit card, debit card, to go to the bank, give your documents, give a hard copy, sign on it and get it. Then what happened was, like people started doing digital onboarding where you can upload your documents. And even after that, what happened was the TAT of onboarding a customer was high, because even if you do digital onboarding, the verification happens manually. Then another step, what happened was, like again the government databases, like PAN is our income tax number, like Monica said, Aadhaar is our social entity number. Everyone built out databases and API products, so where companies, startups like us can connect to the database and verify the documents. So step by step only we have also grown. And I have worked a lot in digital onboarding, because like 2 years back before COVID, most of the companies were doing manual onboarding. And once COVID came in, like we did not have any option. Then we started investing in digital onboarding. And so even in B2B companies, right, if you are going to onboard a business, also multiple documents you have to collect, because again, the market in itself is very tech savvy. So if you don't onboard customers correctly, then a lot of frauds can happen. Like people can easily eat your system and then they can take money out of you. To give one a very interesting example, like what we did was from Razorpay, we are a B2B company, so we did a digital onboarding. So we would have to collect bank accounts of the merchants, that businesses, so that once they collect money from the end customer, we would have to settle back the money to them. So we would have to verify, is it the correct bank account? So what we did was, we did a penny drop. We dropped a penny into the account. In response, bank will give us the name of the account holder. So we were verifying it. So how did people game the system? People started creating multiple accounts and started dropping penny into their account. So there was one fraudulent activity happening, but we found out as soon as like in an hour or two. But again, if with digital onboarding, you are increasing the customer experience. At the same time, you would have to make sure that you are putting risk checks in place. So our risk check was, like, from the same IP, 40 calls were coming in the same time. So we identified, and then within 40 rupees loss, we were able to identify. Like if we had not put this check right, they would have been eating our APIs throughout, and they would have been getting money in their accounts. It's 1 rupee, but if they eat like 1 lakh times, it's 1 lakh rupees. So so again, increasing customer experience comes at the cost of making sure that you build the risk checks. So that is how we have also been growing. But the last 2-3 years has been tremendous growth in terms of like onboarding and building trust among the customers. So yeah.
Thank you for that. And I totally agree. Like building fintech products is one part, but nowadays we see that a lot of other like edtech products, e-commerce products are launching their fintech arms, right? So I think Monis and Haseeb can relate on this, because Finja, the Dukaan provides credit line through Finja, and the Sagir is also launching their buy now, pay later solutions. So all of these other industries are launching their fintech arms. So I would like to take up with, I think Monis first. What do you think from the e-commerce perspective? What is like the future like in these kind of domains, and when you're serving the markets like the retailers who are not very literate? So what are some of the challenges in educating them, or mainly, I would say, documenting the undocumented credit line processes? So how are you computing those lines, and how are you revolutionizing and digitizing these processes?
Yeah, so first of all, I'd like to say that it's just a very exciting time to be here now in Pakistan. I've been here since 2003. I'm a dinosaur. The first VC investment round was raised by us on my jobs platform with Rosie ages ago. It was very hard to raise. But last year alone during COVID, 28 startups raised VC funding. This year, it's going to be close to 50. $250 million US has been invested into startups just this year, and the year's not over. This is big for Pakistan. These are huge changes that we're starting to see in the startup ecosystem. A lot of great innovation is happening. I remember 4 years ago, we launched the first smartphone wallet called SimSim. At that time, JazzCash and EasyPesa were still on USSD. There wasn't even a license for a fintech. So we did a partnership with a bank. We became a super agent and we launched a wallet, and we broke all the rules, and we worked with State Bank and the regulator. We created these rails for onboarding with Nadra integration, and a very exciting time. And now those rails are being used by others, and others have now innovated on top of that. Since then, State Bank has launched licenses for organizations like ours, like an EMI license was launched. We were the first one on the Finja side to have an EMI. So the regulator is moving at lightning speed, which is just so encouraging to see. At the same time, startups are starting to work with each other, which we never saw. There was a competitive atmosphere. Oh, I've got a startup, you've got a startup. We're in the financial space. We don't talk to each other. Now all of us are working with each other. Like with Hasib on the Finja side, we help them on the loan book because we know how to score their merchants, and we're helping with the loans that they're giving to their buyers. The most exciting opportunity that I want to highlight in response to your question is basically this opportunity of reaching this unbanked and a population that we previously considered unreachable. And that wasn't exciting. We always went for the top of the pyramid, the highly educated people that at that time had smartphones, and we were excited about it. It was a small percentage of the population. In Pakistan now, we have about 110 million smartphone users. 5 years ago, that was about 50 million. So we've added about 60 million smartphone users in the last 5 years. And who are there? They're not the kind of people on this panel. They're my cook, they're my plumber, there's a guy on the street, and they're all starting to get active on their smartphones, but we haven't built anything for them. We still have our nice English interfaces. We launched an experiment called rosegar.pk, which is an extension of my jobs platform for blue collar. In our pilot phase, we've gotten 60,000 workers who are barely educated, maybe up to grade 5 at maximum, self-onboard through a smartphone, through video interfaces, through voice interfaces. We've got voice prompts, and they're using it. So we've discovered how to reach these people that we previously thought were unreachable. And that's been phenomenal. And if you look at the growth on the wallet side, and most of the financial inclusion is coming from the wallets, by the way, not the banks. And that growth is coming from this group of people that previously never were on the internet. They never owned a laptop. Their first experience is on their smartphones. And they are adopting payments, and it's solving more instrumentable problems than it is for us. You know, we can still drive around and hand each other cash. They can't go to a village. So on Dukaan now, the target for Dukaan was to get the MSMEs, the really small entrepreneurs on the street that you see, a guy who runs a retail shop or maybe a stall, or a woman at home who makes her cakes. It's been 4 months, we've clocked about 110,000 shops on this platform. And as we clock these shops, these aren't filers. These aren't organizations who are incorporated. They're barely educated, but they're using a simple interface that we've learned that they can use because they are on other platforms like WhatsApp, and they speak to each other through this platform, the voice notes. As they start to sell these small goods, and we've integrated the last mile for them, we've integrated the payments, all they have to do is upload their products and sell. As they start to sell, we get information on how they're doing in sales. We've got the KYC information because we do an ID card check through these rails that we've already created. And now these people have a credit history without having to incorporate and become a filer, and we can score them. And then from Finja, we take that data and we drop the money into a wallet created on the Dukaan app, which is partnered with a Fintech to create a wallet. So this ecosystem is growing very quickly. The regulators are moving as fast as they can, but despite any holes, which are quickly being identified, fintechs and startups like ours are finding ways to work around that. And that's the most exciting thing, that we now have a tool to make a dent with a population that has largely been ignored by the banks and by us. So super exciting times.
Yeah, I think I have a lot of follow-up questions on that, but I think I'll give Haseeb the time to first comment on what he thinks is moving forward, because he's into the same domain and you're partnering with Sanjay as well, targeting Kirana, small stores. How's the acceptability like of these digital solutions, and what do you think is the innovation possibilities in this space?
First of all, thanks a lot for having me here. So many amazing people from both sides of the border doing great things. Like Monas rightly mentioned, we're seeing a great change happening in this time. Adoption is rising, mobile phone, internet, smartphone penetration is on the rise. What we're beginning to realize is that digitizing the offline segments of economic activity is now really critical to uplift South Asia. And people who have so long lagged access to opportunity, they've been stuck in a cycle that's perpetuated by, amongst other reasons, lack of choice, transparency with respect to using these products, inclusiveness, and ultimately they cost their participation to the economy. You see, we must, to enable these people and to empower them, we must allow them and you must enable them to create and grow economic value, and also at least capture a fair share of that to be able to get out of that cycle that they've been in. Must have the capability and stability to support the next generation to step out of the cycle by enabling them with having access to education and healthcare. And obviously, these kind of this strata of population is obviously very, very vulnerable and exposed to accidental and unforeseen financial shocks, particularly in times of COVID. We've seen how many livelihoods have been impacted. Companies like B2B companies bringing these offline segments into the online net and partnering up with great fintech startups like Finja itself, by doing these kind of partnerships, we are allowing these people to step into this net and get an experience and a fair share of the opportunity that is available to the rest of the population. And there are so many ways to go about this. And something as simple as a buy now, pay later option to these Kirana stores is barely scratching the surface. This opens up the opportunity to enable them to provide access to insurance services, health services, perhaps getting some education fund for the children. There's many directions you can head on to, but it's really exciting to see, particularly the aspect that these new startups are all coming together and they're collaborating, they're working together to solve these problems. I think that signals a great future for Pakistan and some great footsteps to follow from across the border as well.
Perfect. I think fintech is a topic that we can talk lots on, and I think the audience is also really active. We're getting a lot of questions in the chat. I'm really sorry I won't be able to address all of the questions, but one thing that's very repetitive in all of the questions is about financial literacy. And I think this is something that's very common across, I think, both India and Pakistan. The socioeconomic factors are the same. The kind of people we are targeting, the literacy level, and all of those things are the same. So I think I'll just open it up to the panel who wants to take it forward. How do you ensure financial literacy with the fintech products? Because as Monas rightly pointed out, we're still building English products with English interfaces and targeting the top tier of the pyramid. So how are you ensuring that we are literating all of these people who are underbanked, underserved through the financial products that we are building?
May I just interject really fast as we're going to open up, I think,
Sure.
Extremely interesting ideas here. We've seen that the interfaces have already been cracked on how to reach these individuals. My driver is very active on his WhatsApp, as is my plumber. So the WhatsApp interface through voice has worked very well. They're on Facebook. They know how to upload images. So the interface issue has been solved. Now, in terms of educating them and smartphone access, all of these are great points. But the reality is, if we build use cases that allow them to earn income, they are going to learn how to use them. You can look at the story of Uber drivers here in Pakistan. They learned how to use smartphones. They learned how to buy a charger and to have it on their cars. So if we build them opportunities to make income, to grow their livelihoods, I guarantee you our people are super enterprising and you won't have to spend a lot of time educating them. Of course, we should, it will accelerate this, but making easy interfaces and making compelling use cases will solve this problem.
I think that's a very good hack that you have pointed out. I'll still open it up to the panel to take on, maybe from the India side, how financial literacy, in particular, like from the finance perspective, how financial literacy is being catered.
I'd like to chime in on this one. There are two learnings that we have both from India and from Africa. Since Monis mentioned about the mobile wallet solution, I think one thing that we've learned very quickly is that in Africa, the assisted recharge model and the assisted mobile money model has worked for decades. Now, the question really is, when we're trying to handhold a person who does not have any access, does not have any literacy quotient to attach to, maybe it is better to actually have trusted sources and trusted access points. And this is where telcos, mobile wallets actually come in, because they are the cheapest, at the same time, the most easily available solutions out there to help the excluded understand what digital money feels like. Now, if I may speak for everyone in this segment here, I'm sure you've heard this many times. I have money in my hand. How do I get it into my phone? Now, this may seem really normal for all of us who are using smartphones, but it's not that for them. And secondly, I would say that, again, the ecosystem at large needs to play the biggest role possible. I'll go back to the card networks, because I do have a background there. But the whole idea of a two-factor authentication, of what it is to actually use your card, to get money out, to be able to do a card swipe, rested with the banks and the associations coming together. The whole ecosystem needs to understand that you're working with customers, but the literacy program it is not a single for all. It is something that needs to apply uniformly across, and everyone needs to work together, because your customer is eventually my customer, and we all have to grow the pie together. If we keep fighting amongst each other, it's not going to work. And that's where I feel that the government needs to play the biggest role possible, and also need to allocate both funds as well as directions to fintechs. To, for example, like you have CSR budgets, there should be budgets just for financial literacy. Otherwise, we're never going to get our population out of this hole that we have right now.
I think you have rightly pointed out, we definitely need to collaborate moving forward. And I think it was a very, very inspiring session for me. I have a lot to go back and search on, because fintech is a space that's growing rapidly and there's a lot to learn. And with the Indian perspective on board, I think it was very valuable for me, and I'm sure our audience also got a lot of value out of this. Thank you again so much for all of you to join us, taking out time on a Sunday for us here today. With this, we're reaching at the end of this panel discussion, and we'll be having a 15 minutes break after this, and following up with the Edtech session. Thank you again so much for joining us today, all 5 of you.
Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
I think, Anam, we should ask the audience whether they are really, really enjoying the session or not. I need some feedbacks.
Yeah.
That would be lovely.
We'd love some feedback, and we'd also like to know, okay, what you'd like us to do for the next session.
Yeah. So go ahead, guys. Yep. I see a lot of insights.
Yeah.
Yep.
Next session, use cases. Definitely exciting.
Great session. Oh, wow.
Loved the fintech segment. So did we, Nida.
At least I learned a lot. I'm like a noob in fintech, right?
Yeah, same. And I still have a lot to go back and research on. So
Absolutely. Oh, wow. There's a lot of energy.
Fintech marry Edtech possibility.
That is already happening, Ashish, honestly speaking. Yeah.
I heard this joke yesterday about wed tech. Pay now. Wed tech. Wedding technology. Get married right now, pay later.
Who has to pay? Who has to pay?
Yeah.
I think
we have a very active audience.
Yeah.
We'd also like to know your suggestions for next sessions. I know one was case study, so we're noting it all down. But if you could sort of come up with other sort of, what is it that you guys would think can provide the most value for you?
Batao bhai, batao.
With insurance, if talk happens, will we pay the debt? Startup story, governance
Startup
control.
story. Startup story is a good one.
Yep.
Being regulated individuals from both sides. That's going to be a challenge.
Okay. And talk about the failure of product use cases. How they were tackled. Got it.
Rental economy.
Wow. I think the horizontal panel on, I think, major use cases and how it's building the GDP of each of the countries, how digitization is doing that. That's a great topic. Actually, we can do that.
We have a Q&A that says, Shravan, can we hear some real-time stories from your PM experience? I think people want some humor, Shravan.
You already get a lot of humor.
They wanted something live.
Yeah, no issues, no issues. So you will get a lot of humor from my personal life. How my mother keeps taunting me that you're always on the laptop.
What about the product role best practices? Some examples from Tej where they played a critical position in product help managing the crisis. Wow, yeah.
Shared economy models.
Mr. Sharon, I'm curious to understand, obviously, even sort of Saurabh talked about clone startups and, how India is now getting past that stage of moving ahead, apart from just clone startups. And specifically just touching upon AI and sort of, more blockchain startups and what is the progress there and how in the next 5 to 10 years are we going to see those also kind of starting to spring up in India?
I think one of the points that I think in both the panels were kind of succinctly very raised were specifically that India or Pakistan or for Southeast Asia as an ecosystem never saw digital services before. Right? Yeah. And in the last 20 years, we have transitioned towards digital services. Now, if you look at a value chain proposition, right? Why clone startups worked? That's the very fundamental question that we need to ask. Like, how can we just ascribe a certain model that worked in the West and just took it here and it worked, right? That happened because initially there was no service. And we were only capitalizing on the top set, which were already global users, which new platforms, which were global, which were already using internet. So the clone startup actually penetrated the ecosystem, created value for the top 10% or 7% or 13%, right? But that was also a very huge base. And that's why you would see that even those startups in the volumes of country like India and Pakistan still were able to make billion-dollar companies, right? But slowly and steadily, what we realized is that the great unlocking or unbundling of value would fundamentally happen once we penetrate even more deeper. And we go towards the 90% segment because that 90% spends like 90% of our GDP, right? Because that 10% is a very small percentage, right? They hold a lot of wealth, but that doesn't necessarily mean that every person in volume effectively invests that amount of money. So that is when we went deeper and looked into the geographical, the cultural, the psychographic ways of building products, like the Ola in India, the Flipkart in India, right? At a business model level, at a product level, you would see them very similar, right? Yeah. They're similar to Amazon, but fundamentally the nuances, the small nuances that you build, like coming up with cash on delivery, that was something that was invented with Flipkart, right? So that is where it is happening. And now we have fundamentally realized that the next unbundling of value is going to happen in China, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh. These are the places where the next, because majority of population is here, right? Yeah. That is where the next unbundling of value, and we are doing great strides like Razorpay coming in, Byju's coming in. Then in Pakistan, multiple. I am an avid follower of SadaPay. Yeah. I really like what they're doing. They're very design centric, so I really like that. But Jugnu doing a great job, right? Yeah. So that is something that is going to happen, and that is how effectively we build the next Silicon Valley in our Asia region. We are not just the back burners of technical products that we say that we have a back center India and Pakistan, but rather we will be at the forefront of it, building global products which will be used in the West. Two examples, TikTok and Shein. Shein is a great product out of China and it's just amazing, right?
I think Bangalore is almost already there in terms of the next Silicon Valley. We have a
session in Bangalore. Why don't we do the next session and you're all invited, right?
It's a dream of mine to visit India, honestly. It's truly. And hopefully we can, in our lifetime, we'll have to have one session in person. And we can have that across the borders, both in India and in Pakistan.
Absolutely.
आप आए तो हम थोड़े आपको थोड़ा कराची लाहौर भी तो घुमाएं.
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल, मेरा तो बहुत मन है. मैं वैसे भी अहमद फराज साहब का बहुत बड़ा फैन रह चुका हूँ, तो मैं देखना चाहूंगा कि वो कहाँ रहते थे. जॉन एलिया साहब, तो ये नुसरत साहब कहाँ रहते थे, उनकी कहानियां सुन के मैं बड़ा हुआ हूँ. तो खैर, तो वो सब है.
Then we have one question for you. We're going to sort of touch the Edtech session in a minute, but वो एक सवाल है कि how do you see Edtech being adopted by the lower strata of society, say lower middle class of a farmer's children, etc.?
Yeah. So I think 2-3 ways where I feel that Edtech is going to become really dynamic, how it disrupts the education ecosystem. The education ecosystem across the globe is like a $7 trillion industry. Organized and unorganized, right? And in the organized segment, Edtech is just $400 billion. Yeah. That's like not even 5% of the total education industry, right? Now, what we have effectively seen is that education in India and Pakistan, or for that matter at any place, is not solving infrastructure. Edtech is not solving infrastructure. That can only be done by governments, right? If they invest a lot of money in. So what are they solving fundamentally? They're solving access. Like if like Abdul is a very good speaker, we would put him on the board and there are 1,000 people who are actually seeing them. So that's going to be amazing anyway. But yeah, so 1,000, and you effectively democratize that kind of education to the lower strata. So 2-3 things are very important. Like the first thing is having very low bandwidth quality access to internet, and that is something we have seen major investments. Like Jio has invested like $20 billion. It was the largest fundraise, right? That is happening. The second thing that is happening is Edtech is becoming more horizontally integrated. What I mean by that is there were independent use cases which were solved by independent teachers. Like your tuition teacher used to solve something. Then in a coaching center, there would be a doubt session that was independent, right? Then there will be exam that would be independent. And that was typically used to happen in discrete buckets, right? We are trying to build a close-knit ecosystem bucket in which somebody just enters the ecosystem and comes out with a use case. Like, I want to get into the best university in Pakistan, right? That's my use case. My use case is not to just get my doubt solved or learn a certain concept. So how do you horizontally integrate that? And the third most important behavior is that education is always treated as something in which you kind of improve or level up in life, right? So it's more like a FOMO driven industry where you feel agar tum nahi padhoge yaar to tumhari achhi naukri nahi lagegi, to put it in a very simple manner. But now education is moving towards learning for fun, right? Yeah. Which kind of supplements the passion economy. Ki tumhe maza aane lag gaya maths mein ya product management mein, to tum agle swag wale PM ban sakte. That is how I would want to put it. So these 3 things which are very important, like low bandwidth, high quality access. Second is then the horizontal integration of use cases, and third is learning for fun. And that is what is going to rapidly develop in the next 10 years. And it's going to be $1 trillion industry in the next 5 years, for sure.
I have so many follow-up questions, but I'm keeping it for the Edtech session. ताकि ऐसा ना हो कि सारी बातें अभी हम कर लें, उसके बाद we will like there's nothing. Obviously, this is something that we can go on for hours and hours and not end, but just so that we can have these kind of exactly this kind of insight for everyone that sort of returns for the session. Apart from that, we also have a few kind of comments. We would love to hear some Urdu shairi from Shravan. So Mona Shah is requesting Shravan that
I'll do a +1 for that.
So
यार, तो एक शेर है जो कि मुझे बहुत अच्छा लगता है, जो मुझे हमेशा बहुत इंस्पायर करता है. तो शेर कुछ ऐसा है कि तकदीर का शिकवा बेमानी, तकदीर का शिकवा बेमानी, जीना ही तुझे मंजूर नहीं, जीना ही तुझे मंजूर नहीं. तकदीर का शिकवा बेमानी, जीना ही तुझे मंजूर नहीं, आप अपना मुकद्दर बन ना सकें, इतना भी कोई मजबूर नहीं.
I'm thinking कि अगला घंटा ना प्रोडक्ट को थोड़ा सा
आउटलाइन करते हैं, अब्दुल ब्रेक बढ़ा देते हैं.
शायरी सुनते हैं बिल्कुल.
Let's have one session on Urdu शायरी.
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल.
Mohammed Saran, wow. Yeah, one more question. Do you think post-COVID virtual learning will scale up, or we will be back to classrooms?
I think it's going to be blended learning. I think paradigm shifts happen in a way. See, the whole point of COVID was not that people flocked to digital solutions. It's also they figured out the value of digital solutions, right? So, जैसे पहले तुम digital solution पे तुम जबरदस्ती आए, like you came on Zoom, but you realized on Zoom I can play games, right? Which is not possible in a real-time class, right? And that is something that you can learn through. So once you kind of realize the value, then you would never come, because value brings retention. It's like a mental model, right? If you are already there, if you give value, people will not move from that value and go back to the previous solution. So it's going to be blended for sure, but ऐसा कभी नहीं होगा कि universities नहीं काम करेंगी, क्योंकि human connect बहुत ज़्यादा important.
Yeah, agreed. Shared economy is vanishing nowadays, and rental economy is replacing it. I think that's like an entire huge sort of module to touch upon, and अगर हम अभी से बात करेंगे तो हमारे next session पे time नहीं रहेगा. So we have someone, Sanan, requesting, can someone send me Sean Masala? Of course. Would love to hear someone from Cred on disrupting finance. Their product strategy seems to be the other way around. Definitely, I think this is just like one start of many more sessions to come, and hopefully we can have a longer, just not just a topic on finance, but subtopics on finance, which in themselves warrant hours and hours of discussion and conversation. All right, so let's wait for the next 2 minutes and for our panelists to join in, and then we can kickstart the session. Strain on eyes while having to study on digital medium, your comments. But that's also a problem, right? Like being able to sort of stuck indoor has kind of resulted in if I'm in front of a screen 15-16 hours a day, then, and I'm sure you probably are in 24 hours a day, that probably has led to right now we are still in our professional journey, but especially for kids in their very early stages of developing and learning. So how does that kind of play in?
So I think we are moving towards that. That's also a very relevant thing, because the construct of any product specifically is moving towards relevant engagement. It's not just engagement, right? So that is the reason majority of the players like Apple and other companies, they specifically put focus on those lines, that if you're using an app or any digital platform for a particular use case, which is entertainment, so can I just prompt you that you're not spending too much time over there, right? So it kind of curates your quality of consumption, which is very relevant for you, and simultaneously it takes care of the fact that you're moving away from the digital fatigue that you see. That's one. That's just like the immediate solution, but the long-term solution is something that's implemented in South Korea, where where we are moving towards AR VR solutions, where it actually feels like you're in the class instead of kind of sitting in front of a strict screen. So probably that are just two of the many ways it's going to happen.
All right. Thank you. So we have all of our speakers and panelists join in. I'll very quickly start with introducing all of our speakers. If you guys can, when I sort of introduce you, just wave in front of the camera so that our audience knows who you are. I'll start with Shravan. I think Shravan has been introduced, but for those joining us right now, Shravan is a principal product manager at Byju's. Byju's is India's biggest Edtech platform, amassing over 80 million users. He's also an educator and runs his YouTube channel by the name of Swagwala PM, and the co-founder of Product Tree, which is one of India's largest product communities. We have Dr. Farah Arif also on on our panel. Dr. Farah is a professor of marketing at leading Pakistani institutions like UMT and LUMS. She's also the founder and CEO at Edtech Works. Edtech Works is an experiential learning platform that offers online digital products for business education, mainly targeting university students and corporate executives. We also have Fahad Tanveer, co-founder and CEO of Edkasa. Edkasa is Pakistan's leading edtech startup, which help high school students prepare for their exams online every day in a fun, interactive way by providing personalized lesson offerings. And lastly, we have Aditya Kaushal, Aditya is an ex-product manager at Ajurika. He's a senior product manager at Hiration. And Hiration is basically helping job seekers find new jobs globally, and they optimize and manage their professional identities via creation of resumes and just helping them find jobs, etc., etc. Now, just to lay down the context of the conversation ahead of us, both Pakistan and India have an education problem. Pakistan has the second highest number of out-of-school students, out-of-school children. And similarly, India's higher education system does not have the capacity to achieve enrollment ratios anywhere close to those of other middle-income economies like that of Brazil and China. But both these countries also have two of the youngest population. Being able to educate and upskill this surging youth presents tremendous opportunity for both countries' economic growth and modernization. And we've already started to see India reap great benefits of their initial investment in their workforce. So I'll start with you, Shravan. And how have EdTech platforms led innovation to disrupt the traditional learning model to build a more interactive experience with personalized learning algorithms that allow their services to adapt to each user's pace and needs?
Correct. So it's a very interesting question, Abdul. So the way I look at it is that education as a very fundamental problem has two aspects to it, right? The first aspect is infra and the second is access, right? Now, infra as a core solution cannot be fundamentally solved without government intervention, right? The government has to intervene, build schools, supplement a lot of ecosystem changes that has to happen. But the other thing, which is kind of still a problem with us, was access, right? How do you effectively bring the higher quality teachers on a platform where a lot of students from a lot of backgrounds, multiple diverse backgrounds, multiple income channels are effectively able to kind of get that across? So that is where I think the EdTech revolution kind of started in India, where we wanted to democratize high quality teaching. It was primarily because of two reasons, right? The first reason primarily was that India, Pakistan, or if you look at Southeast Asia, education is more like a level up in life. It is more like a game changer for you, right? So people are really wanting to study and they want to get into the premier institutions like IITs, IIMs, and other institutes, which was not possible for someone in a tier 3 town to think about it, right? So that was the first thing, but people spend a lot of money over there. So if you see that with the advent of internet, the supplementary education sector, which is the tuition sector, has grown like 5x in the last 5 years. And it's about to hit like $60 billion in the next 2-3 years from the current $20 billion. So that is where EdTech solutions have come in, primarily focused on low income, low internet bandwidth. That is where we have tried to build those solutions across. Also, the secondary part is that education was always seen something like a fear of missing out kind of a process, because parents always thought if their children did not study, right, they'll never be able to make the most out of it. But that didn't necessarily translate into different career choices, right? Because most students were pushed into either engineering, doctorate, or multiple other professions, which are like widely accessible to us, right? But what happened as EdTech became more personalized, more adaptive, more engaging, the learning for fun attitude started coming in, right? So students started liking mathematics as something they want to study, right? And once that happened, by the age of 12, there are a lot of people who are exploring other options, that I want to do a PhD in mathematics. I want to do something else in mathematics, right? Why do I want to be an engineer? So it has eventually moved India to a passion-driven economy. And I think that is the case with Pakistan also, and other startups in Bangladesh also. Have kind of been fortunate to talk to them. So these are the two big changes that EdTech has fundamentally brought, and that is why it's rapidly growing as an economy, and we are rapidly innovating to bring more and more engaging educational context to users. Yeah.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. And Dr. Farah, I'd like to hear your thoughts on the same thing, right? Given that you've also been an educator in Pakistan and now running your own learning platform with EdTech Works.
No, I completely agree with Sharwan that EdTech, the value that EdTech has brought on the table is engagement. So for example, when we started our programs, people have told us that who will pay, for your programs in the times of, Google, in the times of other platforms where they can go and they can learn free of cost. It's about the engagement that lured the student or the executive in our case to the platform. So one thing is definitely the engagement. The second thing is the access. So for example, when we run our programs, people sitting across Pakistan attend our programs. So in the physical space, you cannot have the luxury to attend programs at such a low cost. So it's engagement, it's the access and the cost. So because of EdTech, you have brought down the cost, you have really brought down the cost. So I think these are the three things. Because of these, we have really revolutionized our EdTech space in a few years, and especially in the COVID, people have witnessed the utility of EdTech, where students couldn't go out, where executives couldn't go out, but they continued their learning on the EdTech platform. So I think these are the real aspects where EdTech has seen growth in the last few years.
Yeah, agreed. Thank you so much for that. And Shravan, you mentioned something about the creator economy. I'll come to that in a bit. I'd like to hear from Fahad, and just to talk about that. India has seen a surge of edtech adoption, right? With recently Eruditus becoming India's 4th edtech unicorn. We know that a similar opportunity exists in Pakistan, but what, in your opinion, are some of the biggest challenges to help us get there?
Yeah, that's a fantastic question, and some of the things that Shirvan and Farah talked about, I would agree with. So, but there's a lot of other things. I think every market brings its own opportunities and challenges. So, as far as edtech bringing greater access, I think there's no doubt about that. 7 years ago, edtech wasn't even really a possibility. Technology infrastructure, everything limited the ability for edtech to really take flight. And especially in our parts of the world where telecom really took off, and that kind of fueled opportunities for EdTech along with other technology businesses to really take a meaningful stake in the ecosystem. So I think it's a really early days. Even though I am an EdTech entrepreneur, I would still have cautious optimism. The reason is because we don't operate in a vacuum, right? We operate in a larger ecosystem. And we're still learning on how this change will impact real learning outcomes, impact on the economies, expectations from people, right? So one of the things I think when we create a lot of access, we also create a lot of expectation. People, when they attend an online course, they feel like now I deserve a $50,000 job, whether I have that real validity of that skill, and there's a lot of supply of skill. Obviously, it presses down on the price, right? Like so there's a supply demand of the labor ecosystem that we're going to impact. So it's a larger microcosm that we have to kind of see where EdTech plays a role, and we don't create a bigger problem than we're trying to solve. So I think that is where governments are still trying to understand, and something what Shirvan sort of kind of pointed out to, that the real intervention has to come where the public sector takes this a little more seriously. But I think I understand their challenges. But we're involved in a lot of policy in Pakistan. We engage with government pretty frequently. And I think, I can understand their position that because we may disrupt this space, we will disrupt a lot more than just education. And that will bring its own challenges that the government may not be equipped to take on all at the same time. Now, add that to COVID, that has created a whole new set of challenges. So I think as people who are trying to innovate in a space and trying to solve a very real problem of access to quality education, I think we need to take a wider view of, how are we creating an impact? And when we are creating that impact, how else can we help manage this impact so that everyone benefits at the end, right? Like, we are at a better world than where we started off from, not at a worse position than we started off from. So I think that it's a much more nuanced space than just saying, hey, we created access to online classes, now you can learn, great, now you got a certificate, you can code. So what, right? Like, I think the next steps also need to be thought out by great success stories like Byju's, right? Like, they have created that ecosystem. They have proven the case. Thanks for doing that for us. Now we have a guidebook to getting there. But at the same time, I think, you have bigger challenges now to see where, like, where do you take all these people who are doing so well, right? Like, what are they going to do in the new economy post-COVID? What are their new roles that you're going to be help to define in the future to come? So exciting times, but with cautious optimism.
Yeah, and I think that's a very interesting point, right? Like you mentioned that there's the organized sector, and then there's the unorganized sector that Shravan also pointed out, that the organized sector kind of looks at edtech platforms as very transactional. Okay, I need a certificate. When I do it, I want a certain sort of payback on that. And if I don't see that payback, unfortunately, that edtech startup fails, right? Because one of the reasons for successes of edtech startup is that they bank on success stories. But what about giving that education to at the lowest strata of the society and at a very early stage, right? Primary education, kindergarten education, being able to take that wide public school infrastructure and changing it into virtual classrooms where, if I'm learning maths, for example, at like grade 1, my objective is not that 4 years down the line, I'm going to sort of earn an income through it, but just learning maths for the sake of learning maths. So,
yeah, I mean, can I take a quick stab at it? What you just mentioned, it's a great point. So yeah, that's exactly what I'm talking about, right? Like you've got to have a horizon much further down than 5 years, right? Like that's really important, because I think people who are in that position, like Shravan or myself, or who can afford to have a longer term horizon than even governments, should take that opportunity. So let's take a step down, right? You said, okay, learn kindergarten maths, great. Then what happens, right? Then you want to go to middle school, right? Or you want to go to elementary school, and then you want to go to high school, and then you want to study science, and then you want to get into a medical school or an engineering school. Well, just in Pakistan, I'll give you a sense of it. About 5 million kids will appear in high school science exams, right, this year. And all of them think they can be doctors and engineers. Do you know how many medical school seats we have? 6,000, right?
Yeah.
So even if you are in the top 1%, you're not going to make it, buddy, right? It's not because that you were not smart enough or you don't have access. It creates frustration because that infrastructure can't come along at the same pace as what, say we're helping them push. Now, there's everybody's a first divisioner, great, so what, right? So I think it's a much more hand in glove sort of effort that needs to be put in, because we're going to put undue pressure on the entire economy if we pull out or we put out so many people who are deservedly accomplished at that level, but then they don't have a role in society that they can fill, right? It has to be a much longer vision. It has to be a much broader vision to create meaningful impact. Otherwise, we're going to be looked at as a problem maker, not a problem solver.
Yeah.
That's a very fair point, I think, which you have just mentioned. Very, very valid point, because I also fundamentally feel that is the way we have to evolve an ecosystem of creating better thinkers in general, who kind of effectively understand that whatever they like, they can move towards that profession. It doesn't have to be just choked towards engineering or medical seats or IIMs or stuff like law colleges, which are just the 3-4 forefronts. We have seen the growth of the country going in, but primarily moving towards passion. Nowadays, you see a lot of people, like I've seen a lot of Gen Z students, and they coming that I want to become a YouTuber, right? Because I feel that's just an amazing thing. And that's an outcome of EdTech. Fundamentally, that's an outcome of EdTech, because people are enjoying the process and they are not relying that outcome is the deservability of getting a certificate. It's more the process that I enjoy, and the outcome is something that I want to figure out. And that is towards where we are also striving towards. We are moving away at least from that kind of stereotype that's built, that success stories lead to more success stories, but we are moving towards in creating success stories by themselves, that I figured out a path for myself. So I completely agree on that point.
Yeah. And I think that also kind of creates a very interesting also topic that I personally also want to talk about, and also we've got some questions for it. And I think, Aditya, we can have you talk about it. Is what Shravan touched upon, is the rise of the creator economy, right? Now, edtech platforms are no longer limited to just teaching you, for example, just fundamental subjects, but also empowering you to be able to sort of learn skills to be a YouTuber, to be an influencer, to be a photographer, to be a video editor, right? And then also help you, and that given with the rise of platforms that allow you to be able to monetize on top of it, right? In terms of freelance work. So that's like how have edtech platforms enabled that? And then, like both Fahad and Shravan mentioned, that when you have a sort of a lot of people that are skilled, but you no longer have the jobs, you have the supply, but there's no longer the demand for them. Or if the demand is there, it's just for a certain kind of quality of demand that's required. How are these kind of content creator economies or content creating platforms changing that, or platforms that are empowering content creators?
So if I come to the EdTech part, how exactly EdTech organizations are enabling learning from different people. So as an example, the base was always classroom program, which we always considered to be something where people learn and engage with their colleagues and etc. So whenever I see EdTech learning, I see it as a 360-degree platform where I can say that you get whatever you are getting into a classroom program. And along with that, you will also have facilities like 24/7 support, which EdTech companies are providing. And along with that, you also have your peers onto a Telegram group and etc. So the most important problem which I saw earlier in the EdTech space was with respect to course completion, but now it is also being facilitated and there are people to support you throughout the process. So as an example, coming back to the question which you asked on which Shravan was speaking about, you can pick up anything which you want to learn, maybe playing guitar, making YouTube videos and etc. So you have a defined path which is being tailored for you so that you can go ahead and learn. Effectively ensuring that you have a skill, you are getting the knowledge depending on whatever you want to do. Definitely, there are skills for which we don't have desired opportunities till date. As an example, 3 years down the line until the TikToks and YouTube Shorts is still very new, where people started coming and creating their own content. But now going ahead with abundance and how exactly the ad space is changing with respect to how different organizations and companies want to promote on these channels, there is demand of video creators, YouTube video publishers and etc. So that is also evolving on its own. So this is what I would want to add. But again, with respect to what exactly people look for into an EdTech course or something is with respect to learning, that what exactly theoretically and practically that is being ensured. And apart from that, they also have a defined goal associated. As an example, someone wants to go for a job change, maybe, or someone is just looking up to learn a new skill and effectively earn a second source of income. So that is also possible throughout the globe. We have people, we are in a scenario, maybe we can say that we have an ecosystem where I can learn anything from anyone from anywhere. So this is something which was never possible. As an example, if I look back to my school days, I had to go to a specific teacher if I wanted to learn mathematics. And maybe if they are not into my city, so I come from a tier 3 city where there were 1 or 2 reputed teachers who are very good with mathematics. And if you want to learn something else, you have to relocate to a new city and again, think on everything. So that is all not an issue now. Teachers are bringing, as you were saying, how exactly content curators are bringing up everything online. So that is also being done. Teachers are bringing on their courses. As an example, I see Udemy a very good example for the same. Anything you want to learn, you go onto the platform, a very cost economical way. You pay 500, 600 rupees, you start learning. And if you feel you have the interest for the same, you can go into a deeper course, which engages you better. And again, get the result which you are looking for. As an example, if it is with respect to learning or maybe as you were mentioning, freelancing. So that is also possible. So this is something which is a total disruption which happened with respect to that boom. And again, COVID fueled it to such an extent that we are working from our home and even without bothering. I think it has nearly been 2 years and we don't have to think about how exactly productivity and everything is right now.
Okay. Thank you so much for that, Aditya. And I'd like to sort of similarly, Dr. Farah, because Edtech Works is a learning platform that's specifically targeted for business education for university students and corporate executives, right? And in your understanding, how is that again providing a platform for content creators to be able to sort of build their own virtual classroom and earn a revenue through it?
Abdul, I missed your question. Can you please repeat it? Because
Sure.
I think there was.
Yeah, absolutely. Am I audible now?
Yeah, this is better. Yes.
Yeah. No, I was saying that similar to you, similarly with like Edtech Works, which is an learning platform for business education targeting corporate executives and university students. How do you see that Edtech platforms basically empowering educators and content creators to create their own virtual classrooms and platforms to educate others and at the same time earn revenue through it?
Yes. I give you an example. During the COVID, government of Punjab, which is one of the provinces of Pakistan, they ran a program of e-learning and through its TEFTA, which is a vocational training institute. And we were learning partner of that. So it was a pilot project and 15,000 students were trained online, and hundreds of instructors were also involved in this, and they used our platform for the learning process. So it ran so successfully that the students who were doing these programs, and the programs were based on web page development, graphic designing, Amazon, they started earning while they were completing their project. So there are two things: students were learning, and they started earning, and at the same time, the teachers, they also developed their content, put the content online, and also earned. So this is what Edtech provides. This is the supply side, and that's the demand side. So both the sides can get advantage through Edtech platform, and this is what we have done successfully in the last 8 months. And it was COVID, which means that there was no physical interaction between the instructor and the student, but student and instructor, they instructor managed to deliver the knowledge, and the student managed to acquire the knowledge. So Edtech platforms are surely providing this quality opportunity for instructors and for the content creators who can really provide, who would like to earn online. And at the same time, it is providing a huge opportunity to the governments which would like to overcome this gap of quality instructors. And I tell you, students sitting in smaller cities were learning all these skills, which was amazing for us. So in the physical location, it is close to impossible to impart quality education to these students.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Dr. Farah. I also have like a couple of other questions from the audience. And one of them is that the relevance of traditional university degrees in with the onset of EdTech, specifically skill-based learning becoming so easy to do via different platforms. It might just be very reasonable for someone, and also with leading technology companies no longer requiring you to finish traditional sort of university degrees. Google no longer wants it, neither does Facebook. You kind of just have to if you are able to fulfill their standard and meet their criteria, then you basically don't need any education. And the idea is that with that skill-based learning, what's the relevance of university degrees, and how will it continue to how will universities continue to not become redundant in the upcoming years, and how will they maintain their relevance?
Should I take a stab at that?
Yeah.
So I've always thought, see, education, fundamental education, like how do you evolve in getting passionate about something, right? It has always been a factor of three things, right? The person who is teaching, the kind of engagement he holds with the students, and the content he delivers, right? These three things. So if you go like 1,000 years back, the concept of Gurukul was very famous, like where there was a small knit of students, 20, 25, 30 students coming in a class, and the tutor and the student had a very strong connect. They knew what he's doing. They knew what's his progress, right? As education became more democratized, right? Even though access got there, but education specifically has a quality and quantity ka inverse correlation. There's a very strong inverse correlation. When you make courses cheaper, you take away the personalized engagement, you take away a lot of cohort-based learnings that you have, student-student interactions, and all of those things you take away from that, because it has become now a platform which you can access on your smartphone, right? Now, what happens over there is that you might teach someone a transactional skill, but not necessarily a non-deterministic or a life-based skill, that how do you evolve in a difficult situation when you are in a job, right? When you are effectively, how do you try to find a different source of income, right? And eventually that's why you see that the CBC model is now becoming very famous. People are again coming to cohort-based courses, right? So specifically why that is important is because smaller cohorts where personalized attention is there is still a very strong need, and that is always going to happen in a physical ecosystem, right? Where you learn from your peers as much as possible. EdTech is going to enable that for sure. Yeah. For sure. But it is never going to take away the essence of learning from your friends or learning from studying with your peers about a group assignment that you're doing. So I think the future going forward is blended. Nobody is taking away the Harvard University of the world or the best universities in Pakistan or in India. It is just that education is going to, EdTech is going to rapidize that pace in terms of the kind of content that's going to put across will be more global. The opportunities will be more global. Like as a student can Pakistan can today aspire to get a $150,000 job in the US, right? He just, and sitting in Pakistan, right? So this is never going to happen. I feel there will be definite adaptations and innovations of how the model will work out. Like people might go to universities for 3 days, and then the rest of the days they do an EdTech session specifically like that. But it's going to work hand in hand together, and that's where it's going to become a positive sum game. It's never be a zero sum game that to another side.
Yeah. Abdul, can I add something?
Sure, absolutely.
Yeah, I completely agree that it's going to be blended learning. Blended learning is the future. But there is another very interesting aspect is the top universities of the day, they are going to stay here. But we have some very mediocre universities as well. The future of mediocre universities are definitely at stake. Because when students go there, students are primarily going there for peer learning, for entertainment, but the quality of education is not there, and they are expensive as well. So if we can have good edtech platforms in future, then those mediocre universities can simply be replaced. And the other point, which is very important, for example, the places where the students don't have access to universities. So for those students, EdTech can play a huge role where they can sit in the smaller cities and they can get the education. So top universities are definitely going to stay here. Mediocre universities' future is at stake if they can get a good competition from it.
Yeah. Yep. Thought.
Sorry, it's just this is kind of where an educationist perspective might add a little bit more, of a perspective to the conversation. So I think the first thing to understand is what is a university, because I think there's a misnomer or misunderstanding that a university is a place of learning fundamentally. It's not. It's a place of research. Okay. So if you go to the top universities of the world, the professors don't care about your lectures, right? They care about the research, and if they have time, they'll teach you, right? That's what a university's fundamental job is, to conduct research and pass on that industry research to industry to apply, right? Like that's the job. It's not to lecture people. You're fortunate to be in that room with the person who is the foremost expert in that field, and you might rub off some knowledge, right? That's what really happens. I'm just trying to make sure that our audience understands universities are not a place of where lectures are disseminated, right? Now, coming to like the fact that what is the future of the university? So based on that, universities are fairly secure. Right? As long as they keep doing research, they keep putting out cutting edge information and knowledge that can be passed on. EdTech is a dissemination tool, right? Like fundamentally right now, it's a dissemination tool. So previously when they had this research, they published a paper, and guess what? They came to a classroom and told all the students, hey, I found this out about theoretical physics in my research, and since you're my student at MIT, you will learn this, right? And that's why you went to MIT, because the foremost researcher was there. Now, EdTech can enable you anywhere in the world to learn from that foremost researcher. So there is a symbiotic relationship between EdTech and universities, not a competitive one. Now, coming to what Dr. Farah was pointing out, mediocre universities, I wouldn't call them universities. Those are just centers where knowledge is regurgitated. They're not knowledge creation centers. They're just places where the same thing is being taught, something that the professor, so to speak, has read in a book or has not even updated their lecture for 20 years and has been regurgitating. Those should be dead in any case, right? Because they're wasting precious earned money of parents and students' time. And I think that's definitely on the way out. And that can easily be replaced by EdTech, because now you can take an MIT course online. Why do you want to go to XYZ Tom, Dick, and Harry University and spend money? but the cost is still a prohibition, right? Like, so you know, if you really want to get something credible out of MIT, which is not a flimsy course, you still have to pay for it, and you have to pay for it in dollars. I think the value addition will be where EdTech is fully embraced. I'm being an alumnus of Harvard University and watching HBS make that transition, you know, with HBX while I was there. It is a difficult pill to swallow. It will take some time because, you know, there is a debate that the EdTech experience will dilute the value of interacting peer-to-peer, what Shravan was talking about, right? But at the same time, I think that's where people like us are the most valuable to make sure that experience, you know, mostly translates through, you know, online learning, and it doesn't have to be through a live class or through video. It can be a mix of things. But, you know, it is our job not to just, you know, be a one-trick pony, but really try to think this thing out into more depth. You know, how can we translate that experience from an MIT classroom or a Harvard classroom or a Stanford classroom to most kids around the world who really want that or need that skill? So I think it's a very symbiotic relationship. I don't see it being competitive at all.
So we almost, like, we are actually above our time, but I have a follow-up question to that very briefly. So, but I completely agree with everything that you said, but how do then universities, apart from like the very, very top one, or apart from universities in North America or Europe, where you have grants to be able to sort of sustain their existence, but what happens to universities where, you know, they come into an existential crisis? Because like you said, that it's just them doing research, but if students are not paying to come to the campus, then how are they going to be able to sustain their existence?
Do you know how much revenue Byju's makes?
I understand.
Yeah. So imagine if Byju's sponsored a few universities or started one of their own and started funding research, right?
Yeah.
That's how you do
Universities. Along with this, I'll also add, universities are also coming up with their online courses. So they also understand that this space is not something which they can miss on. So as an example, all of those big universities also have courses on Coursera since long. And even this is happening in India, would be happening in Pakistan as well. So they understand their existence.
Absolutely. And just to give you a sense of the number one university, Harvard for that matter, right, at this point, 50,000 students enroll on campus, 80,000 enroll in their online program, right, which is the extension school. The average online degree costs about $45,000. The on-campus one costs about $100,000, right? They don't make less money out of online tuitions, buddy. And most people don't even complete those degrees. So what I'm just saying is you just have to see the equation in its entirety. I think it's only a matter of time before Byju's, you know, starts its own research centers to propagate, you know, cutting edge knowledge to people around the world. I mean, what I understand, their ambition is to make learning accessible to not just Indians, but, you know, everyone and anyone who wants to learn. Our ambition is similar, right? So I think the idea is that this industry is changing, but at the same time, it's not a zero-sum game. I think the important thing to understand is very sort of symbiotic relationship, and we should take it in that stride so that we don't waste energy artificially competing with each other, rather for the betterment of society and mankind.
Yeah. As much as I would like for this session to continue and go on, we have to close it. And hopefully we see many more of Byju's and Edtech campuses across the world. So thank you so much, everyone. It was a pleasure having you here. And now I'll hand it off to Anam for our next session, which is breaking into product management. Thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Hello again, everyone. That was such an insightful session. Thank you, Abdul. We are on to our last session. Last but not the least, and I'll dive in because we are short of time already. So this session is for breaking into product management for aspiring PMs. I'll go on to introduce the panelists for this session, and if you can just wave at the camera so that the audience can relate to you. Starting with Arthur. Arthur is the Director of Product and Marketing at vFairs, which is a leading virtual events platform. And he's also the co-founder of Product Search, which is hosting this event. Glad to have you on board, Arthur. Next, we have Nikunj. Nikunj is the founder of PM School. He has worked in the product management space in the B2B platform, consumer products, gaming, and mental health. And now he's leading the PM School, which is a leading platform for product management in India. Along with that, we have Ankit. Ankit is also the co-founder of PM School. He has more than 8 years of experience, product management experience in food tech, insurance tech, and gaming. And he, along with Nikunj, built the PM School, which is again the inspiring product management platform, leading platform in India for aspiring product managers. And last but not the least, we have Mohimin. Mohimin is currently the product manager at Juknu, and he's also one of the founding members at Product Search. Thank you everyone for joining. Glad to have you on board. I'll dive right into the questions. So maybe let's start with Nikunj. Talking about product management, how in India is the career of product managers like? What are, how do you see aspiring product managers? Is it part of the school curriculum, or is it something that people learn on their own?
Cool, thank you for that question. Super relevant. I kind of get that question every day, especially people who join PM School. See, essentially, think of what product management was 5 years back and today, right? The role has also evolved in terms of responsibilities. At a very 50,000 feet, product management is fundamentally a person looking at discovery side of things and also looking at delivery with respect to product serving a certain consumer set of users. And eventually, it is obviously addressing the business impact, right? Now, from an aspirant point of view, I myself, Ankit, a lot of people in my network, we have learned product management on the job. In fact, I joined a very early stage startup back in the day, I think 8 years back. And generally in a startup, you tend to do a lot more. Your exposure to across different functions is like a standard ask, right? Think of a 10-15 member team. You might not just be a person in the sales team. You might also pick up certain sort of ops responsibilities, looking at how the website is being set up. And that's how you try to sort of build your own skills, right? Getting an understanding of the digital ecosystem. And that's how at least I personally transitioned to the product profile. Today, if you think of how people transition to product today, it's essentially there are like 3 trends I'm looking at with respect to either people joining in a company in a say role X, which is peripheral to product management. What I mean by that is think of an analyst, a product analyst, or think of a QA person or a developer, wherein they work in a product squad. And they have daily exposure with how product managers are driving the initiatives within the company. And within say 6 months, 1 year, they get enamored by the profile and try for an internal transition, like lateral move, right? Getting into product. So you might join a company for which technology and the product is at the heart and soul of their business. And then after 1 or 2 years in your core profile, you transition into product. The second way is people would want to go for traditional, say cohort-based courses, referencing what people were discussing before this, right? Or in India, there are certain B schools where a lot of companies directly hire product managers from. So as a company or even as a college, right, they might not have a sort of strong curriculum. But for you as a sort of a recruiter, you might want to sort of hire people with a certain profile and skill set. And it's easier for you to go to a certain college and look at those skills with respect to the TG that you are addressing, right? That's generally the second way. The third is certain sort of prior experience that is relevant to the company that is hiring. For example, I might have worked in financial applications. I might be a banking person, right? I understand how banking as a domain works. So there's like a natural transition for me. I might not be good in technology. See, product management again is like a multifunction role, right? You should understand how the business works. You should be very close to the consumer side of things. And if you have those 2 or 3 buckets checked, the third skill, which might not be as good for your sort of personal profile, you can pick it up on the job, right? So people might tick 2 or 3 boxes and then transition into a role. And generally that happens in a startup, right? So at least these are 3 ways I see people getting into product. Yeah.
Yeah, thanks. Mohiman, I would want to take this forward with you from knowing that Pakistan's startup ecosystem is 5-10 years behind India. How do you see the product management role evolving in Pakistan?
So yeah, product management in Pakistan is evolving at a very decent pace. Although we don't have any formal education, which allows product managers to kind of get onto the bandwagon or try to kind of be at par with product managers abroad. But I myself am educated on the job. And as Nikunj mentioned, I was kind of someone who was basically in an application analyst role. And then I slowly transitioned to a PM role and did a couple of courses online to kind of upskill myself. And so in terms of Pakistan and how we're kind of moving forward, I think there needs to be a lot of uptake from our own side. And we need to kind of move forward in the way that we need to ensure that we have forums and we have educational facilities that are providing this sort of education to our PMs who are coming up. And schools like PM School or forums like Product Search and the Product Tree are enabling product leaders of the future to kind of empower and be at the forefront of product management. So we are, like you said, slightly behind India, but we're slowly picking up the pace and we're trying to get there. And I would also add that if we are actually moving at this pace, we should also try to learn from those who are in the field and enterprises abroad. So basically having sessions with them, understanding their experiences and obviously learning from them and implementing those policies.
Yeah, Ankit, I would want to pass it on to you.
Thank you so much. So first of all, thank you so much for having us, right? Just adding to what Nikunj and Mohammadan said, right? In India, also, there is no formal training as such in the universities, but over the last couple of years, we have seen, people as young as first year in engineering or second year in engineering participating in case study challenges, right? Which we do or which other communities do, right? And they're actually sending a very neatly drawn wireframes and they actually know business metrics and they actually know a go-to-market strategy, right? They're learning by themselves, right? From the free resources, so to say. But yes, there is a demand for formal education, but as such, I don't see it very prevalent in the university circuit in India, at least. And if I were to just talk about myself, back in 2011, I didn't know anything about what is a wireframe or what is, metrics, but it's so heartening to see people as young as, first year in engineering are actually sending us entries for our weekly challenges, which we do. And product case studies are a great way to at least get started, right? Like that gateway drug just to get started into product management.
I think I totally agree with that. So you mentioned that there are different aspects of being a product manager, right? You're talking about design, neat wireframes, and all of the things. Nikunj talked about how you need to be know the business as well as the consumer aspect, empathize with the consumer. So I think I would take up with Arthur maybe on this. What do you think are the essential skill sets for a product manager to get into this domain?
Thank you very much for that. So I think I'd like to maybe bifurcate that into hard skills and soft skills. And, I guess soft skills are a bit harder to attain. Naturally, it takes a much more experiential learning to really get there. But from a hard skill perspective, like what I've seen is that product managers who are entering the field, they'll definitely need to know what the product management lifecycle is. There are certain aspects and rituals that they'll have to get attuned to. For example, how do you write a user story, what a PRD is, how to actually pick up skills in wireframing and design. And then, like what road mapping is, what prioritization frameworks mean, what data analytics mean. So I think those are hard skills. Unfortunately, I don't think that anybody can come prepared completely for learning everything and then entering a particular job. Some of that will always be on the job training, simply because the domain is very specific. It has its own niceties. But at the same time, what I feel that people really struggle in is understanding what the product management role sort of encompasses. And the challenge that the product manager role is not well defined. It's every company has its own way of defining it. And you can be as simple as someone who's responsible for delivery, or you could be someone who's actually taking the entire full stack, responsible for full product marketing, taking it to market, talking to customers, etc. And based on that, the skill set in terms of soft skills also changes. So at the core, it is a lot about empathy. It's about critical problem solving. You need to understand what the context of a particular problem is. Be very, very comprehensive about various edge cases and the dimensions of the problem, but then take it one step further by building empathy, having a high emotional quotient. Like I think the fact that most product managers struggle in self-projection, for example, they have their own perception about how a problem needs to be solved, as opposed to taking the customer standpoint, seeing that problem from their shoes. That's a challenge of its own, and it's not easily taught. It's not something that comes naturally at times. Even I struggled with this early on in my career. And in Pakistan specifically, what I think is that this particular, a lot of the people who have moved into product management have come from the engineering mindset. When you talk about engineering, they're very solution driven, right? So you give them a problem, they want to solve it. The research aspect is the most thinnest and the weakest part that I see. That there's no inquisition that's actually triggered as soon as a problem comes your way. You're actually thinking about, okay, how do I solve it, as opposed to conducting some diligence, conducting that customer research, which will then give you that platform to resolve it. A lot of the times we just move into the solution space prematurely, whereas the problem space and the framing of the problem is where the massive issue lies. So so in terms of skill set, it's both hard skills and soft skills, just to sum up my answer. But hard skills are some things that you can learn with online training and online courses, definitely. Some of that will always remain on the job. There is no such thing as, oh, I come completely prepared for a job and I won't have anything to learn. There's always domain specific things. Having said that, soft skills are the things that that you'll need a lot more training and possibly much more hand-holding and mentorship on to really scale and do well on.
Thank you so much for such a comprehensive answer. I think I would, as we're discussing that you need some background, so and online trainings, we have PM School and platforms like these. From the educational background perspective, so these are some things that you're saying that people learn. We don't have any education or any trainings within the university or any curriculum within the university for product management. So what do you think, what kind of educational background is required or is a good start point for aspiring PMs to opt for example, in their undergraduate or moving forward? Is it more business focused, tech focused, or what's the sweet spot that they can find for venturing into product management? Maybe we can start with you, Ankit.
Great question, right? I am a firm believer that anyone can be a great product manager, right? Like we have seen in the past 1.5 year running PM School, we have seen people not from engineering backgrounds transitioning into a PM very smoothly, right? They are able to upskill themselves in certain skills, right? Let's say if you're a computer science engineer, obviously you might be at an advantage because you know how technology works or how internet works, right? But then you're also biased because, as Athir said, you are very solution driven, right? But then any people from any background can become a good product manager as long as you have a very strong first principle thinking. You are curious. You are delivery oriented, you know how to get things done, right? You know how to measure and iterate upon it. All of the hard skills you can learn. These are not skills which you cannot learn, right? It might be that, let's say, someone who comes from a B school might have business as his or her strong point, but then he might not have other skill set. Let's say he might not have a UX skill, but then he or she can upskill himself in UX, right? You need to know enough of enough skill set of other stakeholders that you are able to critique or have a solid conversation with them, or you're able to drive home a particular point, right? You are able to talk to your CEO or your seniors that, hey, I want to, probably launch this feature or probably do this solution. So you're able to reason enough with them. And for that, you don't need to be an expert in everything. You just need to learn enough so that you can empathize with what they are saying, right? So we have seen people from QA background becoming PMs, right? I'm a firm believer QAs make very good PMs, right? We have seen people from UX background becoming great PMs, right? We have seen people from engineering background become great PMs, from business background. I have like a few friends who did a BCom as their undergraduate, and now they're product managers, right? So again, we are not at least in India, we're not at a stage wherein it's like the US, where psychology majors are also like a lot of psychology majors also becoming PM. But that trend has now started, right? That people from various backgrounds are becoming PM. And it's good for the community itself because they bring their aspect to the table. Maybe as an engineer, I might miss what a PM who came from a UX wants to say, right? But then the more the merrier, right? You bring certain aspect to the table, you bring your strength to play to your strength and try to upskill in other things which you lack, right? And upskill enough so that you can have a good conversation with the stakeholders.
I think that's a very interesting perspective. Nikunj, would you want to take this forward?
So I'll talk it from a hiring manager's perspective, right? When I'm taking an interview, what are the 2 or 3 things I generally look at is, it's fine if you don't come from a comp science background, as long as you have had exposure to understanding what a product life cycle is. That does not mean do you understand those agile concepts or PRD. As you could have been a project manager from a non-comp science background, or you could have been a marketing person. You understand top of the funnel, how acquisition works, right? Do you understand how a certain piece of code is shipped? You might not have coded ever in your life, that's fine. So if you understand the product lifecycle, you understand the journey of how delivery happens. And secondly, in the interviews, I will also look for your problem solving aptitude. As Atir, I think, rightly put it, right? People a lot of times don't frame the problem, they won't scope it. And I would find it super difficult just by judging a background or a degree, right? I would not know whether the person is good in X or Y. In fact, in India, I've seen wherever we have sort of hired folks, so the first step is generally a take-home assignment, right? And even in interviews, we tend to give them the candidates a very broad global statement, right? Hey, how do you solve for X? So it's not much about the final end solution, but the basis or the background of how do they arrive at the solution, right? What is their research? Did they spend enough time in trying to sort of narrow down the 50,000 feet statement to a 10,000 feet level, right? Do you scope it in terms of, okay, is it the right problem to solve? Have we validated it? Is it the right time? Who are we solving it for, right? And how big is the problem? You are essentially clarifying this. In a real-time interview process, it's more about making it a two-sided communication in a sort of asynchronous assignment. It's more about how the person sort of reaches the final end solution, the features you're suggesting, right? So from a background, just to put it bottom line conclusion is, I would only look for exposure to product lifecycle from filtering from the resumes, and then it'll be basis how they do in the interviews, right? That's more on problem solving, especially the first PMs, APMs or PM1 roles.
Perfect. I think I would want to take it forward with you, Mohimin. From in the Pakistan's perspective, we know that we don't have for now yet like platforms like PM School where you can get certifications or courses or learn about PM skill sets. So we have a question in chat as well that do you think fresh graduates can join as PMs, and what kind of education background would you look at in this context?
Okay, so I myself am not from a tech background. I did my bachelor's in business economics, and I slowly transitioned into a PM role. Now, over the years, what I've kind of done is I've listed out traits of a good PM, and they've come up to at least 7. The first one is he has to be empathetic towards the end user. Right. So if he doesn't have empathy towards the person he's solving the problem for, then I don't think he'll be able to understand the problem and then even go on to solve it. Secondly, he needs to be a good negotiator because he's going to be consistently bugged, or I guess, if you want to say it, harassed by the development team, the stakeholders, and I guess other users to kind of get a certain feature into their product. So he needs to negotiate. Thirdly, he needs to be a good elicitor, right? He needs to be able to draw the information out of that user, right? And he needs to be able to understand the pain points and then kind of come up with the storyboard, the wireframes, and so on and so forth to kind of deliver it. He needs to be a great collaborator, and he needs to be a collaborative leader, right? Because a PM is just, I guess, the starting point from the problem, but the developers, the QA, DevOps, they all contribute towards getting the product out. So he needs to be able to collaborate, but also put his foot down when it's necessary. Then if you look at it from like organizational or even a strategy point of view, he needs to think strategically. He needs to know the product vision. He needs to be able to lay out the product roadmap. And and my personal view is PMs are mini CEOs, right? So you can have a mini CEO for multiple products, or he could be one single mini CEO for all the products that you have a suite of, right? So that's that. And then the other two are, he needs to be passionate about products. So if he doesn't enjoy using tech or enjoy using different apps, then I don't think that's the right job that he should be taking on. And lastly, he needs to have a sense of design and user experience. Now, I say that from a Pakistani point of view, because when you're in a startup, you might not be able to afford a great user experience designer or user research team, or a team that can understand the user's point of view. So he needs to have some sort of, I guess, knowledge, or at least insights into how to design a great user experience from start to finish, and be able to kind of communicate that to the development team so they can produce it and ship it out. So those are the 7 things that I would see, or traits of a good PM. And I think if you are looking to be a PM, you need to embody these, or at least slowly be able to build up and skill up yourself so that you can execute the job properly.
Thank you for pointing out those 7 important traits. I think I'll take it forward with Arthur. What do you think is the necessity for having, because nowadays we see there a lot of online courses or certifications for that matter in in product management, because it's not taught in university, so people go for those certifications. What do you think is the need for that, and how important are the certifications for venturing into, for aspiring PMs, or can they even make their way through without the certifications?
I think we live in an era where certifications have become important. Like my personal opinion on this has changed over time. Like I started about 11 years ago. At that time, there was no concept of product school or PM school at that time. And it was primarily on the job learning. And, like I look at my years and I said, I got by, then why can't everybody else? But the fact of the matter is that the bar in terms of quality has changed. And now, there's such a fast-paced aspect to product management that you really do need to learn the basics and principles pretty quickly. But I would make a very important differentiation here. While the basic principles need to be inculcated as soon as possible, and something like a PM school 8-week course can do that, I agree. PM school or Reforge, product school and Reforge are also sharing their certifications. I think that's great. However, that is not a substitute for experiential learning. That's not a substitute to actually other deeper domain-specific learning avenues as well, because you can come out of that, but when you basically take that product management role at a Swiggy or a Zomato or at a Blink or a repair desk, at that time you'll realize that you have some of the principles which will at least get you through the rituals that you have to do from a roadmap to a prioritization, but you will still have to dig deeper and adjust your model for the needs of that particular product, right? So I've been a part of like 5 or 6 different products, whether that's Talentera, vFairs, Bait.com, Parkwheels. All of them have had different dynamics altogether, and the learning that I had has never been cleanly applied on or uniformly applied in each one of those cases. I had to adjust my model very, very quickly. So I think the certification is supposed to be used as a knowledge base that I'm going to grow on. I think it's extremely important in this era, definitely, to acquire one. However, learning shouldn't stop with a certification. It should just be the baseline. And then you also need to have the flexibility to adjust yourself based on what the product needs are. And that's what I think, like when I get a question about this, like, hey, Arthur, should I do this certification, etc. The challenge is that a lot of people are asking that from a job perspective. Will this earn me a job? And that's a good question, but then you have to then realize, sort of pose the question appropriately. Are you doing this to secure a job, or are you doing this for your product management knowledge? And both answers are slightly different. When you're saying it's for a job, for the Indian market, I can't say as such, and I think Nikunj and Ankit can weigh in on that. But in Pakistan, the product management economy is still growing. There are not many hiring managers that actually know about a product school syllabus or a PM school syllabus. So even if you have done that certification, will that really motivate them to hire you? It's still debatable. It really depends on the education level of that hiring manager, how educated they are about that particular certification. So if you're doing it for a job, my request is that go onto their job descriptions, check out their past employees. Have they done those certifications? If not, then apparently it's not really going to move the needle when it comes to acquiring a job. On the other hand, if you're talking about knowledge, I want to get product management, or I really want to learn the discipline, absolutely, certifications can help in that. I would definitely ask you to learn what the syllabus is, really know what they're probably going to be sharing. And it always needs to be a balance. It should be a balance between theoretical learning, which is great, which always has principles, but also experiential learning or knowledge from industry experts who can at least give that theoretical knowledge some context, some practical aspect, or because otherwise, theory and practicality, they sometimes have a little gap, and that needs to be filled with some certain context. So and to sum up, I think certifications in this era are important, but they are not, they are necessary, but they're not sufficient.
Thank you so much. I think you pointed out a very good point that it really depends if you're doing it for a job, then is it even recognized? So I think I would want to take up with Nikunj maybe in India, because I know PM School offers certifications. So how's the acceptance of those certifications like? Are they even, when Ankit Arthur says that, are they acceptable? Do people really do those certifications for job, or do they do it for their personal grooming?
So the way we run PM School, obviously I won't go deep into that, but in terms of our relationship with companies, right? Today, the program is not run in a silo. In fact, we work very closely with certain hiring managers, right? That really helps. Think of product management again, it's different depending on the industry you are in. Product management in an e-commerce company is very different from product management in a B2B setup, right? The challenges are very different. The stage of the company also, if it's an early stage startup, it's about looking at, can you get adoption? Can you reach product market fit as soon as possible? For an evolved company, it's about cracking the next layer of distribution, new geographies or new verticals, right? So every company has a very different sort of need. At least to answer from a PM School's perspective, and a lot of communities which have come up in India, it's essentially your first step, understanding what product management is, and then getting into your first role, right? If you think of product management, it's like a vast sort of discovery for you to even today. I'm now getting deeper into retention products and obviously consumer tech side of things, where you can slice products into different categories, right? Because every product is different. You cannot just silo. A lot of job descriptions out there have the title product manager, but if you look at the job description, the responsibilities might change. There could be that 30-40% sort of overlap, which is consistent across these roles, but a larger 60-70% responsibilities might change, right? So what these certifications essentially do, as Arthur said, right, that's your first step to getting into what product management is, and it exposes you to sort of have certain mentors and people who are already product managers. You build those relationships, and then when you are trying to sort of get deeper into product management, you need to sort of crack your first internship or crack your first role, because you would evolve in terms of how you perceive product management. I would rather say my first 3 years as a PM, even though my title was product management, I was more like a project manager, right? I was more responsible for the delivery side of things. And as you grow and you sort of get exposure to different types of how product is perceived in terms of a product org in a certain culture, you will also understand, you're also responsible for a discovery side of things, right? So you will, in fact, any aspirant out here, they will obviously try to get into product via internships or maybe going through 1 or 2 certifications. It'll take 1 or 2 years. It's a long evolving process. That's why when we speak to aspirants, the first question we ask is, where do you struggle with? Are you not able to get your profile shortlisted? Or are you getting a lot of calls for interviews, but you're not being able to crack an interview? What is your challenge? Basis that the expectations mismatch should not happen. That's where candidates should really figure out their end goals here.
I think we're running out of time. Just one last question. I'll open it up to the panel. We have talked a lot about for breaking into the product management, like for aspiring PMs. I would want to get your perspective on for PMs who want to like evolve in the role. So as you go into the senior roles of product management, how do you stay connected to the consumer? And what are some of the traits that you need to polish as you go up at the ladder?
So I guess
what do you want to? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
I'll take a lead on that. So, and I'll probably address the latter part of the question. How do we stay in touch with the users? previously, when I was working with a SaaS-based company, we used to communicate with our users via, I guess, blogs, social media, asking them for recommendations, writing newsletters regarding topics that were of interest to them, probably sending them birthday reminders and offering them sneak peeks into what our product roadmap looked like. Now, this obviously gave us a lot of insights into what the customers or the users were thinking. But now that I'm in a B2B startup, and we are obviously the user base that we're targeting is a group of people who have recently been provided an app, and they are not on the same educational level as an average Pakistani would be, right? So even if we write a newsletter, I don't think they'll be able to read it. If we probably ask them for a recommendation, I don't think they'll be able to write one. So what we need to do is we've opted for the other approach. We go down the line of doing A/B testing. We do user focus groups. And my personal favorite is actually we go into the field as product managers and sit with our primary users and ask them what our app is doing for them, what they want us to do for them, and how we can improve the app and the ecosystem as a whole. And I think this is the most fruitful part, listening to the user's experience from their mouth and kind of understanding how he or she feels about our apps and kind of seeing them explain the problems that they're having. So if you are someone who is looking to kind of connect with your end user, so if you could opt for any of these channels or options.
Yeah, I'd like to maybe add on to that, and my perspective, like being a product leader and growing in the ranks, like there is no substitute of talking to a customer. Even when you're a product manager, a product owner, or a product director of product management, you still have to chat with your customers and just really understand what their needs are. I think as you're scaling up in your product role, what I've realized in my little career is that you need to expand on the angles that you analyze a particular customer on. So one is, of course, directly talking to them, but you also need to understand that as you're building up the relationship, there will be emotional bias will always creep in, and they will project certain statements or their feelings and their emotions and sentiments in a certain way. But then you also have to sort of corroborate that information getting directly from the customer from different other angles, whether that's from product analytics, whether that's from customer support tickets, whether that's from your sales team, and then also try to fuel that into your decision-making process. Because sometimes what happens is the customer is saying, "Bahut maza aa raha hai, your app is great, I love it." But then when you look at the analytics, there's no usage, there's no traction, and you're like, "Is that even what's happening here?" And then sometimes you're looking at analytics and things are failing, but the customer is either frustrated or either very, very happy. A typical example of this was, like I was doing Park Wheels, and there was this search feature that we had. Now, at that time we had drunk the Kool-Aid of page views. More page views is equal to greater traction, right? And then we had basically released a new search aspect, and we thought that this will be great. It was different facets that we had launched, and what we had seen was page views were increasing. And we were very happy because we got 50 to 20% increase in our page views and sessions, and advertising was definitely rising in terms of revenue. But when we talked to our customers, we found out they're actually struggling because they can't find what they want to find, and they have to actually keep on adding filters to get to their particular object of desire. So the experience was frustrating, even though the business aspect of things was becoming better. Now that's where you need to expand the angles that you analyze a product, analyze your customers. So even when it comes to a question about interacting with your customers or learning more about them, talking to them directly is one aspect, but then also trying to look at other data points to see or contextualize what their opinions are.
Perfect. I think you couldn't be more right that data is the center of everything. So with this, we're hitting the end of the session. We're out of time. It was a great session. There's still so many questions in the comments and the chat. I have a lot of questions to follow up. And I think this is, since it's not very mainstream, it's not taught in universities and all, a lot of people have questions about venturing into product management. But I think PM School, Product Soch, Product Tree are great platforms to learn for all of these. Thank you again so much for all four of you for taking our time to join us today. It was lovely having you.
Thank you, Nikunj.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys. Thanks, Atif.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Mohammed. Thanks, Abdul. Thanks, Anam. Thanks, Shravan.
Cool, man. Very nice to see you
Shravan.
here. Bye, guys.
I think I'll hand it back to Shravan and Abdul to close the session.
Shravan, आ जाएं आप.
बिल्कुल,
सारे
बिल्कुल.
लोग आपका इंतजार कर रहे हैं. अब्दुल, आप भी आओ. If you don't mind, I'll stay here and.
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Faizi.
Wonderful session. I think from a perspective of like learning, I didn't think this is just going to be like a non-stop blast of information, insights, and learnings. Like I could have wished this could have gone on for hours and hours more.
Yeah, and it was completely beautiful. Yeah, the amount of information I've taken in these 4 hours is probably worth like 40 weeks of my learning, probably packed into like 4 hours. So super amazing. And I hope the audience liked it. I see still 60 participants, almost 55 to 60 participants still in the audience. So I'm pretty sure the NPS is going to be high. Agar nahi hai, to dena hai NPS high. That is a product manager recommendation.
किसी ने कहा है कि ये तो लगता है कि 50 ओवर मैच था और बाबर आजम और विराट कोहली पूरा मैच खेल गए. Which is great. IndoPak का जो है ना वो combination हो गया against the rest of the world.
Yeah. But I would really want to thank you. This is something that is really beautiful what we have done today, and it is the kind of initiative that your team has taken, and whatever little that I was able to contribute. This is just kind of the starting of something big, and I want to take it even more larger. And I would need all your support, and I would love to give all my support from other product leaders and other people, and Adir Bhai, and all of the team, Abdul, Anam, Maha, all of you. Like, you're just amazing folks. Yeah.
Shravan, thank you so much. I'd like to reciprocate. This wouldn't have been possible if you weren't on board. Honestly, we are a nascent and a very small size product community at this time. We have big plans, but then it also takes a trust and determination to actually join hands with cross the border and take it forward. So your contribution in promoting this to your followers, bringing in the speakers was also equally important. And I think ये होना ही नहीं था अगर आप ना होते. But what I'd like to take this as an opportunity, as a forum for all the attendees, is that like India and Pakistan, we have so many similarities when it comes to our demographics. We have so much to learn from each other. Primarily, I think Pakistan has a lot to learn from India's journey, and I think they have already paved that path, and we have so many different case studies to go forward on. So I would really love to have this this conversation, this dialogue to continue. I think there's so much of learning that we can do between each other, and then it doesn't necessarily have to be just limited to product. खाने की भी बात भी कर सकते हैं हम, कपड़ों की भी बात कर सकते हैं, फैशन की भी बात कर सकते हैं. बहुत सी चीजें हैं जिसमें मतलब कि हम दोनों की आपस में मतलब कि similarities हैं, and we can also always celebrate the differences as well. But Shravan, like एक दिन हम आएंगे, हम बैंगलोर में कर लेंगे, एक दिन आप कराची में कर लेना. ठीक है. एंड मैं तो कह रहा हूँ कि अगर और मसला हुआ तो दुबई में कर लेंगे, न्यूट्रल ग्राउंड लोकेशन में. आजकल पीसीबी यही करता है, मतलब कि जब नहीं होता तो फिर दुबई चले जाते हैं हम, तो और नहीं हुआ तो वहां कर लेंगे. बट थैंक यू सो मच, एंड I'd like to appreciate and thank all the Indian participants in this call, as well as the Pakistani people who showed up. Happy Independence to all of you, and I really hope that not just at this level of product leaders, but also at the ground root level, regardless of your job title, पाकिस्तानियों को और इंडियंस को आपस में बहुत ज़्यादा डिस्कशन करने की ज़रूरत है, बहुत ज़्यादा एक दूसरे से सीख सकते हैं. I would definitely request everyone to rise above the hate and अपनों का एक दूसरे से प्यार मोहब्बत से बात करें. I think there will be great things to and this is probably the beginning of many things to come. Thank you.
Absolutely.
Thank you so much, Shravan. It wouldn't have been possible without your support. So, and we're getting a lot of responses in the comments as well. Everyone is loving the session, and we still have an audience of 58 at the end of the session, which I think speaks for itself. So,
I'm super glad. Super glad.
Someone's saying we would really appreciate if we have a short course from Product Source that takes care of local scenarios and helps aspiring PM. That's actually one thing that's in our pipeline, is to be able to create these small courses. Obviously, we have a very, like Arthur mentioned, very grand plan in terms of where we want to take Product Source. And in fact, if anything, we have our application starting next week. There will be a formalized post for that coming in. But the long story short of it is that we will have not one, but many such courses to help you understand on how to get through the product journey in Pakistan.
Thank you.
And I think we still have one request in the comments for a share from Shravan Bhaiya. So maybe we
श्रवण
can
हो
end
जाए,
on that
शेयर
note.
हो जाए, छोड़ दें, सब कुछ छोड़ दें, बहुत हो
We
गई
can
प्रोडक्ट
end
की
on a
बातें।
lighter note.
ओह,
तो अब
श्रवण गा के सुना दें अब।
गा के तो क्या ही सुनाऊं आप, बट एनीवेज मैं शेयर करने की कोशिश करता हूँ। तो अहमद फराज साहब की एक बहुत ही अच्छी काइंड ऑफ गजल है जो उन्होंने लिखी है। तो उसमें वो लिखते हैं, मतलब इसको मैं थोड़ा हम कम्युनिटी के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में, उन्होंने मोहब्बत के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में लिखा था, मैं थोड़ा कम्युनिटी के कॉन्टेक्स्ट में करता हूँ। तो वो लिखते हैं, जिस सिमत भी देखूं नजर आता है कि तुम हो, जिस सिमत भी देखूं नजर आता है कि तुम हो, ऐ जाने जहां ये कोई तुमसा है कि तुम हो, ऐ जाने जहां ये कोई तुमसा है कि तुम हो, ये उम्र गुरेजा कहीं ठहरे तो ये जानूं, ये उम्र गुरेजा कहीं ठहरे तो ये जानूं, हर सांस में मुझे यही लगता है कि तुम हो, हर सांस में
हाँ
मुझे
सुभान,
है कि
क्या बात है श्रवण, वाह वाह वाह
वाह वाह वाह
वाह वाह वाह, ये तो मीम याद आ गई, वो उनकी क्या नाम है, आमिर लियाकत की, वाह वाह
आमिर लियाकत की,
छा गई, ग्रेट। इसके ऊपर तो मेरे ख्याल से एक अलग सेशन करना चाहिए, श्रवण स्टैंड अप कॉमेडी शायरी वगैरह में, वो एक और हम कोलैबोरेशन करेंगे उस पे।
बिल्कुल बिल्कुल, ये तो डेफिनेटली करना है, क्योंकि वहां मेरी ऑडियंस कम है, वहां बड़ा
सही बात,
यूजर एक्विजिशन अच्छा होना चाहिए।
उसमें रिटेंशन बहुत ज्यादा हाई होगी यार, यहाँ तो इतनी हो, इधर से इससे कई ज्यादा हाई होगी। ऑलराइट, Abdul, I think we can close, and yeah, thank you so much everyone.
I think
thank you very much. Bye. Take care.
And see you guys soon, very soon. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.